first off, to our attendees, thank you for coming to the SUA debates. This is a chance for SUA candidates to give their platforms and to clash on ideas, not on the person. And overall, we'll see how these candidates do. Also, I want to thank the candidates for being here today. This is a great adventure that y'all are going to go on. Be sure to keep this civil and respect the moderators, please. I will be recording this for transparency, as well as it will be posted on the SUA YouTube channel. So I'm going to hand this off to our primary moderator, Nick, if you can take it away.
Sure. Hello there. Welcome to the SUA debate for 2021. I'm very excited to be here. I hope y'all are also excited to be here. So like Brent mentioned, I'm going to be the primary moderator for today's debate. My name is Nick, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm going to go ahead and let the other moderators introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and start with Alex.
I am Alex, my pronouns are she, her. I'll go on to Owen.
Hello, I'm Owen Cooksey, and I'll pass it off to Sid.
Hello, my name is Sid, and I go by he, him pronouns.
All
Pass
right.
back to Nick.
So we are the 4 moderating teams. We will be handling a bunch of different and individual debates. We've been working on the debate questions and the format for quite some time, so we hope that all the candidates appreciate our hard work, and hopefully that the actual debate format is as fun as it was to develop. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go into the actual debate. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. So over here, you'll see a bunch of timers. Those timers will be applied during the actual debate format. But first and foremost, we're going to go over the debate conduct guidelines that are over here. So the SUA Elections Commission provides these guidelines adapted from SUA's own community guidelines for the purpose of ensuring a fair and civil debate. Candidates are expected to adhere to the best of their ability these guidelines, and moderators will remind the candidates if infractions occur. The 10 rules that we have and that we ask all candidates to follow are: first, use appropriate gender pronouns as stated. Number 2, use inclusive and respectful language. Number 3 is to avoid gendered language. Number 4 is to respect chosen language. 5 is to challenge the idea or the belief, not the actual person that you will be debating against. Number 6 is to de-acronymize. Try to represent your ideas using full terms instead of acronyms. Number 7 is trying to avoid making false accusations. Number 8 is avoid generalizing communities or acting though you represent a community when you do not. Number 9 is avoid abusive behavior and avoid any actions that would constitute bullying or harassment. And number 10 is to take care of yourself. At the end of the day, this is going to be an intense space, and although there will be points where you are going to be challenged, we hope you are human, and we hope that we respect that as a moderating team. From that, we'll go ahead and give a couple brief announcements. The first one is we encourage all candidates to pay attention to the timers. We don't want to go over time, as this is going to be an already lengthy debate. And if candidates were to go over their said time, we give about a 5-second grace period, and then we will simply mute you and move on. Other than that, we're just going to go ahead and move on to the actual debate formats. Most of the candidates should have already seen this. But for those that are not familiar, this is a brief schedule of what we're going to be doing. These are the opening statements that we're doing right now, and they will actually probably end before 6:20, and we hope that we can get those out to you. Then the next block is going to be President, the VP of Internal or External Affairs, Academic Affairs, and then Diversity and Inclusion. At about 8:10, or when we finish that block, we're actually going to take about a 10-minute break. We'll bring everybody back. We will do Internal Affairs and then Student Life. We'll take another break, and then we'll do the Stevenson elected rep after all that is said and done. So with that, let's get into the debate formats. Now, this applies to every single race except for Academic Affairs and Diversity and Inclusion. So first, the candidate will be asked to give their 2-minute opening statement, and that will be followed by 2 minutes of cross-examination by whoever the moderator is for that debate. Essentially what that looks like is we'll let you talk for 2 minutes, and then whoever the moderator is will ask you about 2 minutes of questions. When the moderator is asking a question, their time will be paused. When the candidate is speaking, the time will run, and that will be the entirety of the 2 minutes there. From there, once we're done with cross-examination on the candidate's specific platforms, we'll move on to the prepared questions and audience questions. We as a commission have several prepared questions, but we are accepting audience questions, and we'll filter those out. And hopefully we can see those questions asked during the actual debate. From there, once we ask the question, it'll be the exact same format as cross-examination. We'll give the candidate 2 minutes to answer, and the moderator will step in and ask follow-up questions as they see necessary. So that's the entirety of the unopposed debates. So now we'll move on to the little bit more complicated. So we'll refer to this as the LD format, and the cross-examination will be the exact same. Once a candidate gives their 2 minutes, the moderator will cross-examine you for 2 minutes, and then we'll give the other candidate their platform and their cross-examination time as well. Then we'll move on to the prepared questions that we have as a commission. Candidate A will have 1:30 to respond to that. Candidate B will have 2 minutes to rebuttal their opponent, and then candidate A will have 30 seconds to sum up their position and rebuttal their opponent again. And then the very next question will flip the other side. So candidate B will simply go first, and we'll go from there. The very last thing that we do at the end of the night is for those 2 races, we'll give whatever candidate happens to flip a coin. We'll give candidate A 30 seconds to ask their opponent a question. Their opponent has 1:30 to respond, and then we'll simply flip the format. Their opponent asks a question, and then the following candidate will be able to respond again. So that is the entirety of the formats, and those are the community guidelines. We'll try to keep the schedule up, but for the candidate's sake and ease, we will, whatever format that we happen to be working on, we will have that up on the left side of the screen next to the timers. Are there any questions at this moment? Yes, I see you, Jose.
So just for clarification, may you go over what the differences are between the opening statements at the beginning and then at the cross-examination for like 2 races, like the 2 candidate races?
Sure. So for the 2 candidate races, the cross-examination for the unopposed will be the exact same thing, except we're just doing it for 2 candidates. So we'll flip a coin, we'll assign one candidate heads. If they win, they can decide if they want to go first or second. They will give their platform. The moderator will then have 2 minutes of cross-examination. After that entire segment is done, then their other opposing candidate will have 2 minutes to give their platform, and then 2 minutes of cross-examination there. And then we'll move on to the actual debate format. Hopefully that explains it. Any other questions? All right, seeing none so far, we're going to go ahead and jump in here to our first debate. If you'll take a look at the schedule, our first debate is going to be the person running for the president, and I will be the moderator for that debate. So without further ado, we would like to invite the presidential candidate to the stage for 2 minutes of your opening statements and your platform.
Can I start now?
Yes, time starts when you do.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. From the global pandemic to the ongoing fight for racial justice, to the disruptive fires, to now the monumental election, to continued remote online learning. We've been through a lot, and yet here we are a year later, still on Zoom, still resilient and stronger than ever. I understand it's been a year of uncertainty, unprecedented challenges, and there's been a lot going on, but at the same time, there has been change, reform, reflection, and now hope. I'm so thankful, and I was so honored to have served as your student body president this past year, and I'm so excited to continue to do so next year. And we've had an amazing year, both within Office of the President and also SUA. With goals of reform, rebuild, and represent, we were able to work on establishing crisis communication team, outreach slug scoop newsletter for students by students, hold a lot of community events, including community art night event, have creative means through social media for example, through wildfire and online Q&A, transition planning, which is happening right now. And soon, I'm so excited for this, we're going to be publishing our helpline mobile application. So as we move forward, I really want to ensure our primary goals are reconnecting with students, refocusing our goals, and reimagining how we move forward after our lessons we learned through the pandemic. And through focus on hope, which stands for health, opportunities, progress, and environment, we will be able to transition into this new normal. And I can't wait to get back in person and see you all face to face and do this together. So as I end, I want to end on one note saying there's still a lot going on in the world, but if you're in this together, as we've learned through 2021, we can do this together too. So let's do this, y'all, and let's do this together. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll go ahead and begin 2 minutes of cross-examination. So my first question is, you talked about one of the things that you've done in SUA this year is publishing a newsletter. I was wondering how that newsletter differs from the campus-wide newsletter that goes out every Tuesday.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, we are about to publish the newsletter. We have been having a logistical issue, but it's going out tomorrow, like today/tomorrow. But the difference between the Tuesday Newsday and the Slug Scoop is basically this is created by students for students with an emphasis on highlighting student organizations, student initiatives, student projects, student organizations, and really like putting it out there for students. We do not.
I'm going to pause your time here. Let's talk about that student organization and that student outreach. What exactly is there? Is there a type of submission process where people come up and they show their work? Do you actually outreach to students and organizations in order to get them in the newsletter? Explain that process to me.
Yes. So we wanted to make sure like we are opening it up to all students. So of course, it's going to go out to all students through social media and emails, but also thanks to outreach committee, we were able to set up like a form which will collect student input. And then we will be going through all the different information. And if there are too many and we cannot include everyone, there is a raffle process where we'll be picking out of random. But a lot of the focus is to ensure like students feel comfortable and very easy to submit to this process. And it's just a Google form and they'll be able to like see it in the actual newsletter, which is the MailChimp.
That makes a lot of sense. So let me move on to one of the other reforms that you managed to accomplish this year. You talked about crisis communication. And considering that we're still in a pandemic and that climate change is an issue if we have wildfires again, how specifically will the crisis communication outreach to students that need it the most?
So that's where hope comes in. So crisis communication team is really in charge of getting resources and really compiling resources from different organizations and putting it out there to students. But specifically, you mentioned wildfires and then the environment. So part of HOPE is E, which is environment, which is all about campus climate and campus environment. So we're going to make sure we do a lot of research and we look into why these things happen. For example, I had a live Q&A with the fire marshal, understand the root of the issue, and then really see how we can mitigate it, and then give that accurate, reliable information back to students. Oftentimes the problem is students don't know the full picture, and as student body president, I'm able to communicate with different entities and give it to students in a very digestible manner. And we just published Cruise News. You should all check it out on SUA Instagram, which is basically doing so.
Right, thank you very much. So we'll now move on to our prepared questions, and they're essentially the same format. I'll be asking the prepared questions from the commission, and then we'll give you 2 minutes to answer, and going through, if I have any follow-ups, I'll go ahead and ask them. So our first question is, with the you had mentioned during the pandemic, that is one of your platform issues. So during the pandemic, many students have had a lack of motivation to participate and attend classes. With the university intending on being in person in fall, how will you accommodate the students with lack of motivation and other issues? More specifically, how will you make sure that the university is helping students transition so it is easier for them to come back in person?
That's awesome. So there are two ways. One is HOPE H, health, and another one is through P, which is progress. So the way our office and myself and everyone in SUA, what my focus is going to be is really focusing on student physical, mental, and social health, understanding the problems students have faced throughout the year and really seeing what initiatives and what events students want. So really focusing on ensuring students know like COVID testing and vaccination, which is still going to be ongoing in fall. They know the guidelines and are aware of it. Another one is them knowing like mental health resources and initiatives, and also looking into CAPS resources and seeing if it's at capacity and working with them. And
I'm going to go
last
ahead
one,
and pause you there. I just want to follow up on that. So you talked about making sure that students know about the COVID guidelines and vaccinations and all that fun stuff. According to the LA Times, April 22nd of this year, the UC system is going to mandate COVID vaccines for all enrollment in fall. How will you specifically make sure that students without resources and access to testing are not left behind in their educational development?
And that's part of progress. So I'm part of a bunch of task forces right now, and I had to advocate with the admin to become part of it, which is instructional housing and engagement. And part of it is also understanding these vaccination mandates. And I was just last week in a meeting with President Drake, UC president, and right now they're still taking feedback from students. So if you look closely in that news, like it's not finalized, they're still taking feedback, and then they're gonna mandated for all students. So I'm going to make sure in that feedback, I ensure they have alternate resources for students who have immunocompromised, like who cannot take it. But also when we are on campus as part of progress, I want to make sure there are testing sites, there are free vaccination opportunities. I know a lot of colleges around the country are providing vaccination centers, and we will be doing that soon.
I'm going to go ahead and pause you and just ask you one last question on this issue. You had mentioned that you were seeking to outreach and make sure that students have those information specifically. How will you work with the administration and the staff in order to make sure that students are aware of their vaccination protocols?
It has been ongoing. Honestly, this year was all about building that foundation, understanding who to talk to, and building that network and connections, but also advocating for students and putting in that student perspective in this online world. Even though students are not seen, like we want to make sure they're being heard. So the way I would work with admin is being part of these task forces, being part of these groups, taking input from students and then bringing it back, and vice versa. So I'm going to be involved in both sides and help students.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to some of our next prepared questions. So this one, again, kind of refers to that information. And the question is, how will you make sure that information is given to the General Assembly in the SUA? And how will you make sure that new members feel included, especially when we come back in person?
That's a great question. I've been having Zoom side chats with the representatives, and that's a question I've been getting, and it's a feedback I'm taking. To break down your question, first one is, how are you going to include students when they come back on campus? So we need to remember it's going to be both like in person and back remote, so hybrid. So we want to make sure like every single time we're thinking of both sides. And if it's in person, we're still social distance, we still have bonding events, which will help students like overcome that barrier. But also back home, like we're still talking to those students on Zoom. So it's all going to be about ensuring there's a bond, communicating with the representatives and understanding their needs and giving that back. And also with trainings and workshops and more events closer to when we start, so that everyone's like used to the system.
Speaking of making sure that SUA has bonds within its members, isn't it going to be difficult for the people that are not there in person to have the strong as bonds as the people that are actually there in person? How do you solve for that equity when people are going to be there in person and people will not be?
I do need to take Assembly's feedback because it's all of our space. But what I'm thinking as of now is fall, in order to ensure like everyone has equal access and to ensure it's still safe, it's going to be online. We may only come back to in person like in winter quarter, and when we do come back, if it still continues, we're going to make sure like all students who cannot still be present have like access through Zoom, and we will ensure like they're projected. So I'm really hopeful in fall, like we will continue remote, and in winter it will be hybrid or like in person.
One last question here. So in regarding coming back online in fall and then coming back in winter quarter, hopefully in person, if we continue to remain online in fall, specifically the SUA, how will you work with the administration to make sure that our student accounts are still free on Zoom so that way we can host our own meetings?
I'm really like, it's not even a question in my head. It better be on like free and accessible to all students. I will ensure that happens. I haven't heard them like taking back that access as of yet, because there are so many students who are going to be in like in remote settings. So I'm pretty sure like that won't be a problem. But if it is, just like I've been advocating for a year and we've been going really strong for an online world, I'm still going to advocate in person.
All right, we'll move on to one of our last couple of prepared questions here. And this prepared question is regarding you specifically. You have been the president of SUA in this past year. And so the question is, during this past year of your presidency, is there something that you would do over? Is there something that you would change if you could go back and reset at the beginning of last year?
You meant change or continue? Which one?
Change primarily, but if you want to, if there's something that you also wanted to continue, that is an available answer.
Okay. I really want to continue our shared sense of community. Our theme was community, and I think we've been doing a lot of great work this year, just like being there for each other and empathizing with one another. And I think it's important to remember that no matter what setting, it doesn't have to be a pandemic for us to all work together. And that doesn't mean like we have to be on the same page, as long as we are respectful. One thing I would change is, I think because of this online world, engagement has been really hard, and I'm just catching up on getting to know individuals within the SUA. I would really like try to put myself out there and be like in one-on-one meetings with representatives, so they know me and we feel comfortable moving forward. And if they have any issues, they can come to me. Also, in terms of like students, I want to make sure like I send out more campus-wide emails, which people will actually benefit from, where I synthesize all the information that's going around. For example, right now, data breach, there's so many different issues, housing, fall 2021 planning. And I know admin sends it out, but it's not in a way students want to see and not answering the questions students have.
So let me follow up on that. So you talked about how the Tuesday Newsday, or at least how admin sends out information, is not really accessible to students. How are you planning to change that within your own office?
So first thing to note is throughout this this year, I've been advocating for better emails. So if y'all notice like slightly better emails with like more colors and bullet points and pictures, we've been advocating for it and they've been like listening, but there's still a lot more to go in an email setting. The way I would do it is actually have more visuals and videos. I think people don't have time or energy to keep reading long emails. I don't either. So I would use like creative means, like maybe a short snippet video, which is easy to see, and really engage with students through that means.
Right. We'll go ahead and reset here, and we'll just ask you our one last prepared question, which is, how do you see the role of your office, the presidency, how do you see that role when faced with a crisis that is either on campus or even possibly beyond campus?
I think because I've been a pandemic president, I've been faced with a lot of crises, but I think that's exactly why I stepped up and I wanted to be the president to really help students back. So I can give you an example of wildfire. Like I really saw that there was a disconnect from what students knew versus what was happening on the ground. So I was able to communicate with our Dean of Students, Garrett, who was on the field, and have a live session where students could see where the Boardwalk Evacuation Center was, how it was working. But also we were able to put out infographics, which were shared like over thousands and over times, which was very helpful because a lot of times information right in these days are through social media. So I want to make sure like I'm out there and really seeing where students are rather than waiting for students to come to me. So the whole idea with crises is navigating them based on what's happening. And I'm going to continue to be creative. And in this hybrid world, I would have to figure out two different ways, in person and remote. But I'm excited for these challenges because I think I can handle them since I've handled a lot of crises this year, but all thanks to the student support and everyone part of my office, my vice presidents, SUA representatives, and all students and organizations.
All right.
We'll do this together.
Let's talk a little bit about managing crises, specifically in this hybrid world. You said that that's certainly going to be a challenge. How exactly do you plan to overcome making sure that information is available for both the people that are in person and the people that are off campus?
So as of now, I don't know my housing situation, but I'm pretty sure like there are going to be a lot of students in person, and I may most likely be in person too. So if it's remote, I already know different ways like students, we can engage with students. I think something I'm yet to do and I do want to do is like start up new like social media platforms. I know there are a lot of students on Reddit, there are a lot of students on Discord, like getting to them through different means than just Instagram and Facebook, which we've done a lot well this year, and through like websites and emails. But another way in-person students would be to host those like in-person social distancing events. I would love to see people in person, face to face, and then see what they need and then provide it to them while I'm with them.
Right. We actually have a little bit of time here, so we have one last prepared question for you. And that prepared question is this. What is an important issue on campus that goes beyond your platform, something that you don't necessarily touch on heavily? And how do you think you would address that potential issue in your presidency if you are elected?
It's kind of part of my platform, but this is the part of the platform that I'm so excited for and something that I'm not really like an expert, which is environment. And by environment, I mean two things, which is campus climate in terms of safety and in terms of sustainability. And I'm no expert in either, but I know it's a huge issue. And a lot of students, like when they come back to campus, they're not feeling safe and there's high tension. I really want to get to the root of the issue, talk to students, understand their perspectives, and get back to them based on what they need. And another thing is sustainability. I really want to look into what UCSC is doing so far. I know there's so many amazing organizations working already. So I want to really amplify their voices, support them, work with them, and see how I can use my platform and my resources and help them better, because it's not like my expertise, but I know that's what students want.
And one of those issues, at least prior to the pandemic, and presumably this will be an issue once we start coming back in person, is that the university typically accepts more people than there is housing on campus for those, particularly freshmen and sophomores. Working with those experts of sustainability, how do you make sure to increase the housing on campus and really work with students and work with experts to try to solve that particular issue?
I think there's a lot at stake. So one, whenever people ask me about this question, it's like quantity versus quality. Like, yeah, we welcome new students, but at the same time, we want to make sure the quality for the current students still increases. Just because we have extra housing doesn't mean we have more capacity in the library or more like rec lounges or more like places to sit and just like relax. So we want to ensure like it's not just housing that we tackle, but we tackle like all sorts of things that students relate with. So I guess the solution in terms of sustainability, that was your question, would be to really understand like as new students come in, like sustainability, the way I think of it is not just like living there and housing, but also through like waste, that is like waste management. There's like food insecurity, there's basic needs issues. There's so much that happens. So I guess my first step would be to understand what's happening right now. And I have some general understanding, but I want to get to the root of it and then see if new students are being added. How do we combat that? And how do we increase our capacity as a whole and really ensure there's quality over just quantity?
All right. Well, thank you very much. Those are all of the prepared questions that we have of the commission. And so we're going to go ahead and move on to our next debate. But thank you very much for showing up and participating. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun and excited for other candidates. Thank you.
All right. So the next debate that we have is going to be moderated by Owen, and that will be the VP of External Affairs. So I will go ahead and toss it to Owen, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm Owen, and I'll be moderating this debate with Rojina, which will again be a single candidate debate. We'll be going through a couple of, you'll get a chance to do a opening statement, and then we'll do a couple of prepared questions, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer and 2 minutes of cross-examination. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce you and give you an opportunity to make your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Owen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rojina Bozorgnia. I have the pleasure of serving as the current external vice president to the Student Union Assembly, and I am here running for re-election and seeking support. So under my leadership, the EVP office has been devoted to advocating for students through organizing, coalition building, lobbying legislators, meeting with campus administrators, and continuing to build on relationships that the office has held for years. During the past year, under my leadership, this office has advocated for increased COVID-19 testing accessibility on campus, as well as system-wide uplifted international and transfer student voices during turbulent times for international students on our campus, protected student workers and unions, also during times of layoffs, where AFSCME workers have been facing those system-wide, from the beginning of the pandemic, stopped tuition hikes, advocated for safe sleeping spaces for houseless students, and obtained additional funding for food pantries, mental health support services on campus. And we've also registered hundreds of students to vote, as we tend to do every year. We were also able to provide students with tons of different opportunities digitally, of course, to attend conferences, lobbying meetings with elected officials and campus admin, as well as provide workshops and panels on issues that affect students, such as the federal Pell Grant or immigration issues for students. Those are a lot of the issues that I hope to continue working on next year as EVP. And that's a lot of what our office has accomplished. And big shout out to my amazing team that was able to accomplish so much with the resources that they were provided during this remote setting.
All right, thank you for your opening statement. I'd like to ask a couple of questions about it before we go in. You mentioned uplifting international and transfer student voices, and I'd like to get a sense of what ways your office was involved in doing that during this time.
Yeah, so our office has, in my second year previously, I served as legislative director in the External Affairs Office, where I worked very closely with and built a relationship between our office and STARS, which is the Services for Transfer and Reentry Students. And so we've been working very closely with them and trying to obtain representation for transfer students in the SUA and formalize a transfer student representative seat, as well as just connecting them with transfer students system-wide that would like to talk about transfer student issues. We've also been working very closely with the UC Student Association Transfer Student Coalition and organizing a transfer lobby day and getting students out to that. And so they have the experience to lobby elected officials on transfer student issues, which is something that our office is super proud of. Being able to participate in that last year. And then in terms of international students, during the summer when there were directives from the Trump administration about international students not being able to re-enter the country if their classes are going to be fully remote in the fall, and all of those turbulent issues in the fall that came with international students, we kind of reached out to different departments to ensure that students knew that they could come to us if they wanted to speak about any issues. And we also worked really closely with the UCSA International Student Coalition.
Sorry, if I can ask a clarification question. You say that you reached out to departments for to assist international students. Are you talking about departments in the administration or student organizations? Can you clarify that for me?
Well, we're speaking about the international student resources. So there's an international student advisor that we work very closely with. My chief of staff works very closely with whenever there's like an international student lobby day or there's a letter that we want their input on. We send it to this particular professional staff member that shares out with international student circles.
Thank you for clarifying. Well, we've got 19 seconds left in this cross-examination. You also mentioned building coalitions as a central part of the work that the EVP has done this year. And I'd like to get a sense of how you feel those coalitions have worked to further the other goals of your department.
Yeah, so one of the very important issues in the External Affairs Office is civic engagement, and through our Slugs Vote Coalition and connecting with different campus organizations like the NAACP and various other ones, we've been able to kind of make that coalition stronger.
All right, thank you. We'll move into some prepared questions at this stage. Starting with a question fairly similar to one that Shivika got as a returning candidate who's running for re-election. Is there something in your previous year that, knowing what you do now, you would approach differently or would change?
Yeah, I definitely would love to be able to prepare transitional documents better. I feel like our office, a lot of what we dealt with in our internal operations could use some like reworking just in the timeline of hiring folks in our office, and then also just in intern positions and stuff. There's just a bunch of different ways that I found that I can make my office stronger to optimize everyone's strengths in terms of professional development and such in my office. That's something that I really love focusing on is, I have the opportunity to hire all of these students in my office and undertake so many really dedicated, student leaders. And I kind of just want to make sure I provide them with all of the tools that they need to grow in their roles. And I feel like that's something that I'd really like to improve on next year.
Yes. In addition, is there any policies that you would continue specific to the lobbying and organization work that you've done advocating to student groups outside of your office?
I mean, our goals and initiatives kind of in the external affairs office tend to carry on from year to year. It's our priorities usually are around the same things that I mentioned in my candidate statement that's available for folks to see, but it's issues like tuition, basic needs, reproductive justice is something that's super important to us, and we've been advocating for a lot in recent years. There's been a lot of legislation that affects students in higher education around reproductive justice, so that's near and dear to us. We've been forming really great relationships with the UC Green New Deal Coalition, so more climate change issues are, I guess, kind of honing in more on that, and the sustainability office on our campus is something that I'd like to kind of maybe focus more on that I haven't in the past.
With regards to prioritizing basic needs, you've mentioned both that you would prefer to raise funds for organizations helping to offset the basic need costs for students, and you would at the same time favor having, you've called for lobbying for greater funding to assist the basic needs of students. And if you raised funds, how would your office be involved in making sure that that funding is dispersed in a more equitable manner?
I mean, in ensuring that campuses, all get equal or, the proportionate amount of funding. That's something that's like part of why we go into these meetings with these legislators, is to ensure that our campus is represented and that legislators can see what we're in need of and kind of hear from students about how important it is that they get allocated funding the correct way, and the amount of funding that we are asking for and such. So that's kind of what we hope to continue to do to ensure that those funds get allocated correctly and fairly.
At the same time, you've talked about reducing tuition hikes, and you've also favored increased funding for student support. How do you see working to protect the funding and increase the funding perhaps for these important agencies while keeping down the direct costs of students?
So we're talking about two different kind of sources of funding. When we talk about when I'm discussing basic needs and such in my platform, we're mostly discussing funding from the state to the UC for basic needs such as mental health and food pantries and such. And then when it comes to tuition, we work in advocating towards the UC Board of Regents to ensure that they don't raise tuition, because those 12 or so individuals that are appointed by the governor are in charge of the tuition of all of these UC students. And so it's important that our office go and make public comment along with other UC students system-wide. We all organize to have that collective voice and that collective action to ensure that the Board of Regents know how detrimental a tuition hike can be.
With regards to these two sources of funding being somewhat different, is your group's lobbying with the regents involved in any way of directing where the money raised through tuition is spent in the university?
So we don't get to lobby the Board of Regents. We don't really get to speak with them. We make public comment during a period where any UC affiliate is allowed to go and say hey, we oppose this tuition hike. In terms of how student money is spent, that is a campus by campus basis. And of course, we have the Student Fee Advisory Committee, which ensures that our student fees are spent correctly on our campus, and they do assessments of that. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's a good answer. Thank you. As an officer who's been involved in the UCSA, what challenges do you foresee working with other schools in the UC Students Association? And how would you handle these challenges as the UCSC's representative?
I actually I've been involved in the UCSA for a very long time, and so I'm quite familiar with the space and have been able to form really great relationships with different student leaders on the campuses, and I've thus far have had really great relationships with fellow EVPs, with legislative and organizing directors that sit on the board, as well as with UCSA professional staff and with our appointed officers. So overall, like I haven't experienced any turbulence on the board with any specific campuses or like with people from other campuses. Generally, it's been a pretty amicable board and really like actually great work being done between the 9 EVPs and fellow board members. So I'm actually just very excited to go into that space and see this new board of leaders and have new people to work with.
Yes. Regards to that, how will you work to make yourself available to the general body while maintaining your position as an officer?
That is also something that I'd like to improve on, is, trying to make myself more available to the student body. I feel like my day-to-day is just so filled with meetings that I don't make that much time, don't block off enough time to go and communicate with my constituency, which is why I love this election season. It gives me an opportunity to go into different senates and organizations and speak with students and, hear what they have to say, and also, share with them what I have to say. And so next time around, I hope to, just have more Zoom office hours. I used to just, when I was an elected representative or appointed representative in my freshman year, I used to just sit in the Stevenson coffee shop and wait for people to come and talk to me in my office hours. And I kind of, if we're back in person in the fall, would love to do that in the SUA office space or anywhere on campus that is safe to do so. And, if things end up being more on the remote side in SUA operations, would love to just have like a Zoom office hours where I'm just like doing homework and have students come in and talk to me. But also we're working on updating our SUA website. So hopefully that'll be like an avenue for students to communicate to the EVP office a little better.
With regards to the office hours that you provide and the other means in which you make yourself available to students, has your office in any way considered moving to a hybrid system in the quarter that's approaching?
Definitely. But if SUA operations and, meetings and all that are going to be primarily remote, then I think that that's where our office is going to follow. But of course, like we've been pretty flexible generally with meeting with folks. If anyone, shoots me an email and wants to meet with me, I'm super available to meet with anyone. And I guess it would really depend on what that individual student situation would be. But if they'd like to meet in person, I'm more than willing to do that.
Well, thank you. I think that those were solid answers. That's all that I have for the prepared questions. And if possible, I'd like to pass that back to Nick to introduce us to the next candidate.
All right. Thank you very much, Owen. I always appreciate you as a moderator. So we're going to go ahead and go back up to our schedule here. And so after External Affairs, our next debate is going to be VP of Academic Affairs, and Alex is going to be moderating that. So I'll go ahead and toss it out to Alex.
Hello, everyone. Since this is a two-person debate, we are going to have to do a coin toss to decide. So Matthew, Dora, would you like to decide who's heads and tails?
Tails.
Okay. And then Sid.
And Sid will be flipping our coin.
Tails.
I will go first.
Cool. Okay. You will have 2 minutes to say your opening statements, and then we will have 2 minutes of cross-examination, and then the same thing will happen for Dora afterwards.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Moran, and I'm running for the Vice President of Academic Affairs position. Should I wait a second? Anyways, okay, I'll start now. My name is Matthew, and I'm currently running for the Vice President of Academic Affairs position. A little bit about me. I'm currently the C10 elected rep in SUA. I also serve as a student representative on the Committee for Affirmative Action and Diversity on the Academic Senate. I'm running my campaign on three main pillars: equity, inclusiveness, and transparency. When I first was running for this position, I was told I couldn't talk about issues of equity. It was out of this office's purview. Other offices dealt with this issue, and I was unsatisfied with that answer. Equity doesn't occur in one place, and including this office. And so I will bring a new intersectional approach to this office, putting issues of equity at the forefront. Historically, this office hasn't reached out to students enough and included them in these very valuable discussions, especially in the Academic Senate. And so immediately I will call for a roundtable discussion where we'll have student stakeholders from student workers, student organizations, and smaller student governments, where I can best learn what they think of my office and what I can do best for the next year going forward. Transparency, I want to put that at the forefront. As we know, an online environment has made transparency really difficult, and reaching out to students has been extremely hard. I want to change that, especially when we're going back in person. Immediately, I would have a bi-weekly podcast where I would reach out to students and interview student leaders, discussing issues of the day and issues that my office is tackling. You know, I also want to tackle some incredibly recent issues that really need to be focused on. For example, the UC Acceleron data breach has put students' data at risk, and immediately we have to get to the bottom of how we got to this point and ensuring our students' information is protected in the future. And also I will address the hidden plan of the UC of creating their own online degree system really under the nose of students, and I will put that as a forefront as well.
Okay, so we're going into the cross-examination section now. You've mentioned a roundtable. How will you reach out to students to have them join this roundtable?
Right, so it begins at reaching out to organizations really soon. It's about reaching people that haven't been included in a lot of discussions on campus. So, you know, reaching out to student orgs, reaching out to senates earlier, you know, and engaging with different student worker positions. It's about, you know, connecting with students at a different level that really hasn't been done before. And I think it would be a great approach going forward.
And what do you want to get out of this roundtable?
I want to, you know, learn what they think of my office. You know, as I mentioned in my opening statement, you know, my office hasn't really engaged well enough with student groups historically. And so what do they think of my office first and foremost? And what can my office do for the next year that would be a priority for students? Getting that information would be really valuable and put my time and resources into things that will benefit students the most.
Okay, and you mentioned a podcast. What do you want to get out of this podcast?
It's to reach out to students. You know, it's very difficult to convey a lot of the complex information that the office, that officers have. And so I want to make it a really digestible for all students across campus, no matter who they are, to have access to the information that I know, that I can relay, you know, important issues of the day and things that my office is doing in a very digestible manner. And so I will use that to, you know, really open up my office and to really put those issues at display.
In a very technological world, it's been very hard to get information out to a vast majority of students. So how will you make sure everyone is aware of all these things you're trying to get done?
I got to use all the platforms at my disposal. So I have, you know, the formal website for my office. I'll have, you know, Instagram, Facebook, various social media accounts I have at my disposal. And as well as when I reach out to these different student groups with that roundtable, I can, you know, help disseminate how to access my podcast and work that way as well. And so a collaborative approach is really needed to make my podcast successful.
Okay. I think we're not going to have enough time for another question since we only have 11 seconds left. So we will now move on to Dora's opening statements.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dora. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a second-year Merrill affiliate, and I'm the other candidate running for VP of Academic Affairs. As VPAA, my initiatives are to reform the academic integrity system, make official channels of justice available to students who want them, and to protect our student representation on the Academic Senate. For academic integrity, the past year has only highlighted the problems we have with it, and they're not going to get fixed when we go back in person. As VPAA, I will push to centralize our misconduct process, which would mean creating a dedicated office for the misconduct program. I would also make sure that explicit student rights are included in the process and a way to enforce them. I would create resources and an advocacy system for students that need support throughout the process. And I would push for the university to make the process more transparent, which would mean publishing things like sanction statistics. Finally, I would push for a change in our culture regarding academic integrity, which would mean things like getting rid of ProctorU and moving towards better teaching practices like lower stakes exams and higher thinking questions. For student justice, for me, that means formal complaints and student petitions. Right now, it's really difficult for a student to take formal action against a professor's misconduct. As VPAA, I will create resources or be an advisor for students who want to take formal action against faculty. Along with that, the Committee on Course Instruction petition process is very inaccessible to students, and right now we don't have any student representation on the committee. As VPAA, I will push to get student reps back on that committee and to make resources for students who need to file petitions. Lastly, for student rep, this last year is the highest that we've had rep in the Academic Senate, and that's incredibly important. So as VPAA, I will push to fill all those seats again. At the same time, this last year is the most opposition we've seen to student rep in the Academic Senate. So as VPAA, I will work very hard to protect and expand our representation on the Senate. Thank you.
Okay, so you mentioned a misconduct office. How will you ensure everything will be unbiased?
That's a great question. A centralized office for misconduct would mean that we hire a group of student employees and dedicated employees for that situation, trained to investigate academic misconduct situations, so that professors don't have to spend their time and resources, and so that students can be like guaranteed and actually just processed throughout the system.
And with this office, how will you make sure that privacy is ensured for all parties involved?
The same way that any other committee or organization that has students involved and even just faculty members involved. That would mean making sure that, you know, the students working on the committee go through the university's FERPA training standards, and that information is shared with students and faculty members and employees at a need-to-know basis.
And you mentioned making sure we protect student representation in the Academic Senate. What is your plan to make sure everyone is protected against admin?
Yeah, in the last year, we've seen the Senate pushing against our representation by trying to remove representatives on various committees and pass different bylaws. As VPAA, I would try to find a group of radical faculty members that are willing to put a bylaw change out there for us that would explicitly guarantee SUA's rights to appoint students to committees and ensure our right to shared governance as is in our Constitution.
And you brought up the low stakes testing. What data do you have that from that's what students want?
I actually did a survey very recently. I got like 200 results, which isn't incredible, but it's a good bit. And in regards to what students would prefer as alternatives to ProctorU, the top responses to that were things like open note exams, just totally unproctored exams, lower stakes exams throughout the quarter, and original higher thinking questions.
And you, or later in your statement, you mentioned ProctorU. How will you get professors and admin to listen to you about it?
Well, they already are. I'm on an academic integrity work group with Alan Christie that's focusing on finding a way to ensure academic integrity without things like proctoring services. I've also been doing a lot of advocacy with student testimonies and that survey, for example, and it's been very successful in getting the attention of our administration and faculty.
Okay, now we will go into the prepared section. Since Matthew went first, he will be answering the first prepared question, then Dora will respond, and then Matthew will have 30 seconds to respond back to Dora. Okay? So Matthew, the Academic Senate can be a complicated place, and some people can be less informed than others. How will you make sure members in the Academic Senate feel prepared for their job?
That's a really good question. You know, part of my job would be to help organize those students together. And so immediately what would need to happen is, you know, let's say a meeting with all of them together where we can discuss what rights you have on these committees, what you can speak about, and really get a good overview of how these committees run. Again, the Academic Senate is a really complex process, and with its own set of rules and systems. And so if students are able to be informed to the best of their ability, they can serve on these committees effectively. And so I really think it's incumbent upon me to best inform whoever is going to be on these Academic Senate committees, to make to empower them and to really have their voices amplified. And so if elected, I will ensure that every single person who is on these committees will be well prepared and ready to really stand up for student voice on these various committees.
Okay, Dora, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I have been a very anxious member of a new undergraduate rep member on several committees, and I know I really would have appreciated if someone just kind of approached me and said, here's what the etiquette in a committee is like, here's how you formally email people, here is what your role as a student representative is going to be, and here's what they don't expect of you. So I think it would be great to work with the student committee on committees to put together, kind of an onboarding system like that for new students on committees. Along with that, I think our current report back system is pretty good, which is like quarterly, every student committee or Senate committee member comes and reports back on what their committees have been doing. But I think we could expand it and make it a better source of support for students.
Matthew, now have 30 seconds to respond.
Right. My time on CAD has been great, and I was very fortunate enough to have professors and a chair that's been really supportive of me. But unfortunately, that's not been the experience of a lot of students on other committees. And so it's important that when students are met with resistance from professors, that they're given that support system as well, because a lot of students wouldn't be prepared to deal with that type of obstruction. So it's really important for me to step in and make sure that they know their rights.
Okay, Dora, now I'm asking you a question. If you weren't to receive all your college reps for the Academic Senate, what would you do to rectify this issue? And how would you make sure that the space was able to run and reflect students' voices?
Can I ask a clarifying question? As in not enough applicants or faculty not letting students join?
Not enough applicants.
Well, I think that we have a lot of platforms for advertising for these positions. Things like the SUA Instagram, the Facebook group, the UCSC subreddit, and just mass emails to students. I think it's very helpful for students to know that the committee positions are paid positions, and that it would be helpful to just include more information on what being involved in the committees is like, because I know the reason I don't apply to things sometimes is that I don't know what it entails, and I'm scared, and I don't know if it's worth my time, if I have the time, what I'm going to get compensated for. So I think that making sure that information is spread on all the platforms that we have and as thoroughly as possible will help get more undergraduate reps for the Senate.
Matthew, you may now respond.
That's a really important question. And, I think we have to think unconventionally when we're reaching out about these positions, because, reaching out on social media is a great first step, but there's a lot of students out there who may not even be on social media or, isn't a frequent on there. And so that's why I'd really advertise working with different student organizations where you have a lot of these great thinkers and who are very passionate about issues on campus. We saw when students were confronted with COLA and how we can come together with that. We need to work together and work in a collaborative setting to harness that same type of energy on places like the Academic Senate. And so I want to help collaborate and reach out to these different student groups to bring them onto the Academic Senate. Because if we get that same energy and we can have that same diverse set of ideas on these committees, we're stronger as students, and we can best have a campus that reflects what we want as students.
Dora, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
I just want to agree with Matthew that going through student orgs is a fantastic way to ensure the word gets out to more students. Along with that, I see SUA making announcements in classes pretty often. And I think that's a good way to make sure that students that otherwise wouldn't see anything would know that there are opportunities for them to get involved in Senate committees.
Okay, Matthew. The academic senate is very large. What will you do to make sure BIPOC and LGBTQ plus voices feel/are heard?
A great question. Being on these formal academic committees, it can be daunting. It's really difficult when you're put in these very uncomfortable situations. And so, like what we talked about before about making sure that all students would be informed when they're getting on these committees, we have to do that next step. And as being a resource for them to when there are issues, they are confronted and we can get them right away. If a student feels uncomfortable or unheard on these committees, immediately that has to be brought up. And we have to make it a comfortable environment so that these issues do come to light. And so it's about creating a cooperative environment where all the academic Senate committee members will feel comfortable, whether it be talking to me or anyone in my office, and about whatever issues that come about. And knowing that they have a support system in place so that if they are mistreated or not given the same chance as someone else on a committee, that they can report that and can be addressed immediately.
Dora, you now have 2 minutes to respond.
While I am a member of the LGBT community, I can't say that I represent everyone. So I would definitely work with our communities on campus and our big 5 student organizations to see what they think would be best for making sure that students of color and queer students feel like they're best represented and are more likely to apply to these positions. It is so incredibly important that students' voices and experiences are represented on the Senate because that's where policymaking happens and that's where decisions are made about students' lives and academic careers. And it's so incredibly important to make sure that students of color and queer students are included in that.
Matthew, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
A great way of including BIPOC students and LGBTQ students would be, working with resource centers in a collaborative, type of partnership. The resource centers do a lot of great work. And I think if we can partner up with them, we can make this office more inclusive, as well as ensuring that all students have a voice on their committee.
Okay, now question to Dora. A student is penalized by a professor for not turning in assignments because they were celebrating a religious holiday. How would your office handle this?
In this situation, there are systems for the student to go to if they want to take official action. And I want the VPAA office to be able to help students with exactly situations like this. The students' options would be for a formal complaint or a formal student grievance, which are very similar, but they're very similar, but have slightly different outcomes. I would make sure that the office serves as basically an advocate and a resource for the student and fills out all of that paperwork because it is hours and hours of paperwork and evidence gathering and formatting. And I would make sure that those complaints get to the right people in the review committees.
Matthew, you now have 2 minutes to respond.
This question brings up a bigger issue of a lack of cohesiveness between academic departments on campus. This is handled very differently among different departments. And so one department might be more lenient than another. And so what would be best for students would be for a cohesive approach to this type of issue where, we can have these exceptions and have leniency for when students do have a religious holiday or even a personal excuse, because, as we know, during this pandemic, it's been really difficult to, plan ahead and know what challenges lie ahead for students. And so we need that push and pull flexibility that unfortunately doesn't occur enough with some professors. And so we need to establish a cohesive policy dedicated to this very issue and issues like this with late work and ensuring that students have the ability to turn in their work regardless of what their situation may be.
Dora, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
I totally agree with Matthew that flexibility is really important. That's why I plan to push really hard on making that complaint system a lot less administrative work and a lot less formal work, because I know even if we have advocates and resources at our office, the more difficult that system is, the less students are actually going to go through with it. I think it should be really easy for students to leverage complaints in their classes, like with things like that, especially because it's so important with our 10-week quarters to get those complaints through.
Okay, now a question for Matthew. What does financial transparency look like to you? How might you go about increasing UCSC's financial transparency given the millions of dollars awarded to the institution, with many students wondering how this money was allocated?
That's a really good question. I've personally seen the budget being on one of these academic committees, and from that budget, policing was not even cut one penny. Yet we've seen dramatic cuts to all of our academic departments. And so if students were, had this information at hand, there'd be a lot of opposition to it. And so, it's in making sure that the budget isn't just going through, small town hall events. This should be published and sent to students, whether it be through mass email. It needs to be at the forefront of what students see, because ultimately we run this university as students, and we pay our money into into this university, and we deserve to have clear and accessible information regarding our budget. And so being open and transparent about how our money is allocated is really key, so that we can be better advocates for ourselves, as well as, addressing when we see something wrong in the budget, we can stand up against it and pointing that out before, it's passed and it's too late to really reverse course. And so, I think that would be a really important solution.
Dora, you can now respond.
I besides just students, I have heard various faculty members and administrators even complain about the lack of transparency with the university's budget. So I think that that's a great opportunity for us to work with faculty members and administrators in making pushing our central administration for the university and UC itself in making our budgets more transparent. And that would mean not just making, the actual budget available for students and faculty members alike to look at, but also the way they make decisions and how they plan to make decisions in the future more available to students. I think one channel that we have as students and as the SUA is our representatives on the budget committee. I don't actually know what the confidentiality rules for that committee are, but I think that that's a great opportunity for our student representatives to bring back information, make it palatable to the average student. And, whether it's with our report back committees or just using platforms that we have access to, we could use that to make budget information more accessible to the student body.
Matthew, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
A transparent budget also means whatever information they do provide to students and faculty and the public, it's also making it digestible. And so, if they provide, really complex information, which they often do, and where it's really difficult to figure out exactly what they're allocating funding towards, that's not helpful. And so making it a more accessible budget would also help make the budget more transparent,
Okay, now this question to Dora. Many students have indicated a problem with the diversity of professors in classes that attempt to illustrate the struggles of certain marginalized groups. How do you plan to address this issue?
I think that this is another great opportunity for us to work with the Big Five student orgs on campus and research centers. I think that they have a lot more minds and a lot more people with the relevant experiences to give input on this issue. And I would love to use the Academic Affairs Office to boost their voices and put pressure on our administration, where it counts for that.
Matthew may now respond.
This very issue, I proposed and passed a resolution as SUA calling for a more diverse faculty. Historically, marginalized communities have not been included in academia. And so it's incredibly important that we have a diverse faculty where diverse groups are represented. And so, currently the UC has UC Santa Cruz gotten money from the state to pursue more diverse a more diverse faculty, and currently there is a cooperation between UC Santa Cruz and UC Merced, where professors from both campuses have been working together to find out better solutions and better hiring practice dedicated to this very issue. But that's not going to be enough. We have to continue putting on that pressure and making sure they follow through with it going forward.
Dora, you may now respond.
I think grad student instructors are also a good place that we could utilize our power as the Academic Affairs Office in getting them more funding to make the classes that to teach the classes that they want to teach. Along with that, the Committee on Courses of Instruction is the committee that approves new classes curriculums, whether they're faculty members or grad students. And I think making sure that we have good representation on that committee will help in the future with making new courses that represent students.
Okay, now we'll be going into the part where you will each be able to ask each other a question. So Matthew, you can go first. You'll have 30 seconds to ask Dora a question, and then Dora will have a minute 30 to respond.
I want to ask, with the recent rise of AAPI hate crimes against our Asian American students, I think it's really important that we ensure that our returning students feel safe on campus. And so what will you do if elected to address this issue and to ensure that all students, especially our AAPI students, feel safe coming back on campus?
As the Academic Affairs Office, we have the resources to outreach to students, but I think that it would be best to work with organizations and resource centers on campus to best plan how we're going to do our outreach for students. I think we could also leverage things like the newsletter that the president of VPAA has been creating, and the Student Outreach Committee for issues of outreach.
Okay, Dora, now you have 30 seconds to ask Matthew a question.
The recent Acceleron data breach has been a pattern in the university's issues with student privacy and data privacy in the past year or more. What do you propose we do to deal with that specific issue and issues of student data privacy in the future?
That's an excellent question. I think immediately there needs to be an emergency task force on campus that will first look at exactly what happened and how we got to this place where students' information was so vulnerable, where social security numbers have been disseminated to the public, and ultimately support students who've been affected. So simply finding out what happened and leaving students on their way is not enough. There needs to be a cohesive approach by the campus to ensure that whatever financial losses that students may incur is accounted for, as well as the support necessary to manage, how to make sure that, their social security numbers and vital information can be fixed, because ultimately it's a multi-month process to get back a lot of this sensitive information, and a lot of students won't know what to do or where to go next in order to recover their information, their privacy. And so that support needs to be given by UC Santa Cruz and the UC wide in general. This can't happen just on our campus. This attack was on all of our UC campuses, and so this needs to be a collaborative approach all across our campuses to make sure that every single student affected will be given the support they need, and that this will never happen again.
Okay, and with that, we are done. Thank you so much for joining us today. You both did a really great job, and I will be passing it back to Nick.
All right. And again, I'd like to thank both candidates for showing up to the debate. It's always really nice to hear different perspectives from things, even though races are contested and competitive. So now that we've finished academic affairs, we're going to go ahead and move on to VP of Diversity and Inclusion, and our esteemed moderator, Sid, will be handling that. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it out to Sid.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sid, and I go by he, him pronouns, and I currently serve as your 2021 Associate Elections Commissioner, and I will be moderating for the section of Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion, which is a contested race with 2 candidates. So each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statements, followed by a 2-minute cross-examination period. And afterwards, we will transition into our prepared questions. So I'm going to begin by flipping a coin to determine who will go first. Maria or Jose, which of you would like to be tails?
I can be tails.
All right, Maria is tails. All right, tails. So Maria, you begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Maria Dolores Castillo. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I'm a 3rd-year politics and legal studies double major. As a 21-year-old Latin ex-first-generation woman, I have constantly been fighting battles within myself about how I can become a more accepted member in society, how I can speak in a more correct way, how I can fit in with the rest of my team. My self-worth had been defined through what society thought of me throughout all these years, and this is not right. I have grown a passion towards building a more equitable, just, and inclusive environment for everyone around me. Everyone's place in society matters. Everyone's opinion matters. Everyone deserves to live in a world where they are valued and included. So why should we change for society? The battle continues in me and within ourselves. We can do this by continuing to educate students and faculty about mental health, inclusive language, and discrimination, by ensuring that resource centers and student organizations' resources are being reached to as many students as possible, especially the most vulnerable students, by bringing awareness to issues happening within our communities and dismantling mindsets leading toward discrimination, by supporting the increase of BIPOC representation within our faculty and staff, by collaborating with professors, business owners, and employers in creating more internship opportunities for students so that they can strengthen their skills prior to graduating, by keeping administration and the UCSC institution accountable because we deserve what we are paying for: basic needs, equal opportunities, safe spaces, and much more. I have unique personal perspectives in regards to my cultural upbringing and my own interactions with people. I am qualified for this position given that I currently serve as the Director of Policy under the SUA Office of the President and have experience in policy reform strategies in both the local and state government, which is needed to bring the changes that I have proposed in this position. Thank you all for your time, and remember, be yourself, know your worth.
Great, thank you very much, Maria. So I'm going to start it with my first cross-examination question. So you talked about how important increasing equity and inclusivity is. If elected to the position of VP of Diversity and Inclusion, what would your first step towards equity be?
So something that I really want to do is acknowledge like the history between students and SUA. This is my first year, so I haven't really been able to make that connection, but I do want to next year when I'm more aware of the issues and learning about the history that people have been going through. I want to know what are some solutions that students would seek or they would want to see. And it doesn't just have to be one solution, it can be multiple solutions because multiple communities are facing their own challenges. So that's a way that I would start towards building equity.
Great, thank you, Maria. And would you be able to expand a little bit more on what you meant by collaboration with like businesses and the community, what that would look like?
Thank you for that question. So I'm currently interning under the Santa Cruz County Business Council as well as a nonprofit organization, California Forward. So I've already been building connections with partners and business owners. So something that I thought of was to create programs where students can get more of like hands-on experiences prior to graduating, because I know that oftentimes we graduate and we go into the real world and we don't really know what we don't really know what skills they are looking for. So I want to bring like even recruiters as keynote speakers to talk to students to tell them like what they are seeking. So just figuring out a way to strengthen student skills and expose them to the reality of the work.
Okay, thank you. And my last cross-examination question, how might you use your experience with policy in your position if you were to be elected?
So what I've experienced in my policy career, I guess to say, is I've seen multiple issues such as housing, broadband access, climate resiliency, and like countless other ones. And just seeing how there's a lot of racial disparities within those. And just educating students on how each of those connect would really help me bring awareness to the issues and bring more like accountability to like employers or even organizations that aren't doing much. Sorry, I like forgot the question as well. Can you repeat it, please? Or well, we're running out of time.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any more time, but thank you. So I'm gonna now bring it over to Jose. Please begin with your candidate statement when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. My name is Jose Marquez Cuevas. I use he, him, el pronouns. I am a fourth-year Latin American Latino Studies, Politics, and Legal Studies double major. I am a first-generation low-income Latinx transfer student, and I am running to become your next SUA Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for the 2021 to 2022 academic year. I have a drive in engaging in discussions that pertain to equity, and with your vote, I hope to continue my involvement in addressing some of the following issues that I have listed as my priority goals. So 1, safety, campus safety. I will work with student and community groups to develop workshops on imposter syndrome, mental health and wellness, and legal aid networks, as well as to even increase workshops about safe campus mediation tactics. So if students were ever involved with campus police, they know what steps to take. 2, college affordability. I would advocate for greater funding to ensure the university is accessible for all students, with an emphasis on our houseless, undocumented, and parenting students. I have worked with STARS in making sure that transfers were listed as a priority for this upcoming fall quarter alongside the SUA president, and so I'm proud of that as a transfer student. I've also been able to kind of work alongside the Vice President of External Affairs and advocating for double the Pell and even Cal Grant reform and even law, as kind of apart from like being involved with the UC Advocacy Network, advocating for a greater state budget where we have lost about $104 million. And so we're on track on doing that. 3, transparency and inclusion. And so I really want to support and empower the student body and campus organizations and being able to share their concerns in any decision-making process within the SUA that affects students. And so really collaborating with student media that does a phenomenal job at kind of communicating with students and making sure that they're recognized for their work, but also making sure that there is that transparency and communication throughout. And for COVID-19 response, I really want to ensure that we have vaccine distribution continue and accessible to all students, and making sure that housing, in-person instruction, and even we have PPE available to all students. So I thank you all for your time, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions.
Sorry, that was a weird button. Thank you for that, Jose. So on campus safety, I feel like people have different definitions of campus safety. So how might you address campus safety? And also, well, how would you address campus policing in the conversation with campus safety? Because you know, policing can be seen as a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and I wonder if you know, there's some part of campus policing in that you know, in your push for campus safety that, you know, how would that kind of, I guess, translate?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I am a huge proponent in divesting funds from UC Campus Police, and kind of moving those funds even to creating mutual aid networks for students, like mutual aid funds, and even supporting ethnic resource centers and kind of diversity trainings on campus. I have recognized that about 31% on our campus from 81 reports brought by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion are racially motivated, and so that concerns me. And so I really want to work alongside the student led campus climate organization for research and equity and addressing that issue, but also working with student leaders, student organizations, and really kind of combating that racially, kind of like why that rate's so high and what we can do about it.
Okay, great, thank you. So I believe you mentioned that you are a transfer. How do you think that I'm a transfer as well? So how would you say that might affect your, you know, I guess your position? It could be positive or negative. I'm curious to hear that.
Yeah, so I would say that transfers don't really have representation within any legislative body. So I am the only transfer student running in the race. And I would say that I really find that startling, and I'm really trying to work alongside the Vice President of External Affairs, SUA body, and anyone, and really trying to increased transfer representation. So having that transfer student representation within the SUA as a permanent rep, also the DRC student rep. But I think I've really worked alongside STARS this past quarter on really having workshops regarding what SUA is, college senates, and so on how to create your own student organization, how to request student funding, and even working in collaboration in future quarters about HSI funding, just as I know that we are, I just don't want to kind of have the same issue that UCR has had with kind of losing that title.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to dive into our first prepared question. So I'm going to ask this, I'm going to start off with Jose this time. So with the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes around the country, how will you work to make sure that Asian students feel safe on campus? And how will you try to prevent this kind of violence once we are all back in person?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm in full kind of an acknowledgement and condolence with the community. I feel like a lot of our communities, and BIPOC communities specifically, have been targeted largely. And so to me, it's startling. And so first and foremost, I think it's really trying to be transparent again, and someone who doesn't identify within that community, going into these organizations if they feel comfortable, really looking and asking what their needs are, but working alongside even the ethnic resource centers, the student diversity and inclusion program on campus, and other kind of entities, and really trying to ensure that we don't really tolerate those kind of instances on campus. But we are promoting kind of that inclusion, that transparency, that communication, and kind of, again, those diversity trainings, as I think they're really crucial for the student body.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, Maria, you may respond to that.
So first I want to mention that I don't know everything that has been happening with the community, but I'm always willing to learn. And then another thing that I wanted to do, while I've been hearing about these issues that have been happening within the community, I was posting on my Instagram and I got a lot of feedback from students that identified with the community, and they were telling me that they really liked hearing stories or experiences from students people that identified as well as them. So just bringing in, as I mentioned before, keynote speakers or people into spaces so they can educate other students and listen to concerns, and really ensuring that they have someone there, like somebody as a support system. It's something that I always strive for students to have support systems.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I would like to move us to question 2. So I'll start with Maria this time. How would you define intersectional? Maybe.
This is a really tough question for me, just because I did do some research on this, and then I did find out that intersectionality involves a lot of aspects. So just it's like really crucial to educate yourself on a lot of these, and like really knowing about how students' identities, or even religions, or even well, any identity that they identify with, just understanding how they feel like included in a space, and what are some ways that they can feel included or excluded. And I really want to combat more of like the excluded aspects, and really ensure that students really know like the spaces. I want them to feel welcomed in any space that they are. So educating every single space by hosting town halls or even webinars about these issues will really help increase knowledge in intersectionality.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Jose, you may respond.
Yeah, so that to me, intersectionality really encompasses a lot of kind of identities that I don't think I have an exhaustive list of it, but I think it really includes like ethnic identity, racial identity, even kind of affiliation with like what grade level you're in, or even what communities you're involved with. So are you a DRC affiliated student? Are you a parenting student? Are you undocumented? Are you a houseless student? I think there's just so many communities out there that really encompasses intersectionality, but I think it really kind of, you use those intersectionalities, like myself, I'm an LGBTQ individual, and even an X, and I use that to kind of promote those resources and share resources with my community and kind of really elevate those kind of concerns that they have. Like I've mentioned, trans folks this past year recently are just being largely targeted, and I'm kind of in awe and shock that it's still happening, continuing. And so I think we really have to engage in these conversations. So I think I would really want to kind of have these open spaces, but like healing spaces. So like to heal from trauma and kind of just anything to really build and bridge that community, along as just having discussions on like how we feel about current events. But again, I think we have to have a safe environment. And so working alongside ethnic resource centers and other organizations on campus to ensure that no student in these spaces are feeling targeted or kind of discriminated against.
Thank you, Jose. And then Maria has 30 seconds to respond to that.
Sorry. I do agree with Jose and like educating students about intersectionality and understanding how even your race, class, and gender can play a role in how society can treat you. And it's really sad to say that the way other people perceive you is the way you're being treated. So that's something that I meant by dismantling mindsets leading toward discrimination. And then connecting that with educating students and faculty, because I believe that even in a classroom setting, you are feeling that sense of exclusion. I know I felt it myself, and I know other students.
All right, thank you. Sorry. Now to my third question. So, and this can start with Jose. Many families have struggled financially in the pandemic, and this is particularly the case with many low-income students and students of other marginalized backgrounds at UC Santa Cruz. So how might you support students in order to return and finish their degree when many may not have the resources to continue?
Yeah, so this is a really great question. I know myself during the pandemic, my family's been kind of financially struggling, as well as I'm having kind of issues with like stable internet connection. And so again, I think one of my things that I really try to do is kind of learn about certain issues. I think this past year, I was also running last year, but I think I've grown since then and really trying to go into spaces and really learn about the issues. So I've been really trying to advocate for greater broadband access, being into spaces within like my committees within the UC Student Association of advocating for greater ethnic studies resources and kind of ensuring that ethnic studies is a requirement through the A3G and transfer pathways, but also ensuring that the transfer pathways are easier for students to go into a UC. But I think it really entails like advocating again with admin and having these conversations with admin of like why we need these kind of more stimulus funds for students, why we need that greater broadband access, as along with just kind of understanding the complexities and issues that students are facing. And so even having those testimonials that I've even shared with Cal Grant Reform and Double the Pell with even Congress members and state senators with Alex Padilla and Dianne Feinstein, for example. And so I think there's just so much that I'm not I don't know what the needs are of the students, but I would really love to hear, again, how all of us have been impacted, just because I know it's been a struggle for this past year.
Thank you, Jose. And Maria may respond to that.
I do have two things that I would want to add. So in regards to a question that was asked earlier about the budget and where would the money be allocated towards, I think this would be a really important area to put some of that money. So what I would want to do with some of that money is allocate money for more financial aid interns or even staff, because I know that sometimes we have a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions and I didn't know about that I could get work study, and I had to wait in a whole like hour-long line. And then another thing that I would want to do is continue something that the E² organization is doing in reaching out to high schools and educating students about ways that they can advance in college or even help with the transition, because it has been difficult with myself coming from a low resource high school. So just ensuring that we have that connection and the capacity to help students.
Okay, thank you, Maria. And Jose, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I think again, this is still an issue that is really important to me right now. I wish that we could have done a lot more to support students during these times. But like as someone who's worked within the food pantry as a volunteer within the SUA prior to going into an online environment. I think I really want to ensure that we also increase access to food pantries and gift cards, just to kind of combat that food insecurity as well. And so, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Jose. And so I feel like this kind of transitions well into my next question. So I've been hearing a lot of emphasis on ethnic studies and cultural competency. However, oftentimes the individuals who are the most in need of diversity and anti-bias trainings are those with the least interest in actually attending these training sessions. So how would you make sure that education gets out to the people who need it most? So let's see. Maria, you can start.
I actually thought about that as I was figuring out things to put on my platform. And then one thing that I want to do, because I know that a lot of students don't have they don't have time in their schedule to attend webinars that they want to attend to. I know I've had that similar problem. So just making these resources accessible to everyone and figuring out a way to centralize this information. So even building like an app, as we've done in the SUA Office of the President. Or even improving the website so I can connect with the Director of Digital Communications. So just having that information out there for students at all times is something that I really want to strive for in this position.
Okay, yeah, I see the, the accessibility is very important. However, there are people who, even if it is accessible to them, they wouldn't, seek out this training. People who need it the most. So how would you, is there a way you might encourage those folks to attend? Is there any way you might be able to, make sure that the people who need it most do attend? And yeah, you can continue.
So I've actually been in that same position where I've needed help, and I'm still currently in that position where I need help, but I don't know who to reach out to. So I want to be able to build connections with student organizations that will then help me reach out to the members in those organizations that will then it'll be like a ripple effect, like everybody would be helping each other. And that's something that like a key thing that I want to do in this position is build connections, because everything connects, and without students connecting, we wouldn't be this UCSC community that I would want us all to be.
Okay, thank you. And Jose, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, so to me, I think this is a really vital issue that we have to address. Again, kind of these stigmas of like racism, white superiority complex. And as someone who's a Latinx major myself and like an ethnic studies major, I think I really am trying to work on also not only through the A through G and transfer pathways, but instilling kind of making it a requirement for students who are already at the UC if they haven't taken an ethnic studies course, making sure that we're also making these webinars and even workshops as kind of welcoming and kind of also interesting and kind of engaging, captivating for all folks to kind of really gather their interest. But I think we also have to be mindful that we shouldn't be tolerating kind of anything that pertains to, again, like these racist kind of attitudes or anything. And so I think it's, again, working alongside, again, campus ethnic resource centers, the student diversity and inclusion program on campus, along with other members. But also I really want to make sure that we are building those connections with the student body and trying to kind of educating them in a different format. And so like making it see, like, do you have a close friend who's probably a person of color, and kind of seeing like, would you want them to kind of face these kind of harsh realities that they often tend to face? So like microaggressions, for example. And so I think we just have to really make sure that we're really reframing the kind of the rhetoric and trying to really engage students to kind of actually take it seriously and engage with it. Even before students kind of come into the UCSC campus, I think we also should kind of keep it mandated to have some sort of webinar or training before they come attend the campus.
Thank you, Jose. And Maria, you will have 30 seconds to respond.
I don't know if Jose meant like a mandatory training or anything, because I do remember that a lot of students feel as though they are overwhelmed by the trainings that the university already gives them. And then sometimes the information that they receive from those, like they just leave their minds, I guess. But something that I want to do is like in these trainings, I want to make them, as I keep mentioning, accessible for all people, whether it be through Instagram or even on the school website or any platform that I would receive feedback from.
All right, time is up for that. Thank you. So I'm gonna ask a question, starting with Jose. So on the Algeminers list of most anti-Semitic schools, UC Santa Cruz is listed as number 24 of 40 with a rating of 2.5 out of 5. So what will you do to ensure Jewish students feel safe and heard on campus?
Right. So I think this is an issue that I can honestly say I'm not too aware of. And so I think it's just something that I would really have to do my research and kind of be involved. And I'm hoping to kind of communicate with even the Jewish organizations on campus, such as the Jewish student, Jewish Union organization. And so I think just kind of having these conversations with them. But also I really did come out with a striking number as well within these, again, reports brought by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and about 44% are anti-Semitic instances on campus. And so to me, that's, again, it's a striking number. I really want to work even with kind of local partners such as the Santa Cruz Halil organization, and really trying to emphasize kind of understanding some of the strategies that they have been used and like what they can kind of offer me as someone who would have to navigate these issues. But to kind of be frank, I think it's just, I have to make that kind of research and really work and kind of communicate with these organizations myself as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Maria, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Would it be possible for you to repeat the question?
Yeah, no problem. On the Algeminers list of most anti-Semitic schools, UC Santa Cruz is listed as number 24 out of 40 with a rating of 2.5 out of 5. What will you do to ensure Jewish students feel safe and heard on campus?
Okay. So as Jose mentioned, I'm also not really familiar with the issues that have been happening within the Jewish community, but I do want to continue educating myself. And something that I want to strive for is humanizing the problems, because sometimes we don't really know, we just hear, but we don't really take action. And then another thing that I would want to do is bring more representation, because even though we are trying to bring more minority representation, it still feels like there's an imbalance in there. So that's another way that I would be able to help with the Jewish community, and even attending their spaces, as Jose mentioned, and just being aware of the issues and then making that making the knowledge or issues that I've learned about accessible to all people on all platforms.
Great, thank you. And Jose, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, and I think, again, working just alongside these organizations, understanding kind of the issues at hand, again, really addressing why the rates of anti-Semitism is on campus, and kind of working with campus police and administration to see what tactics they have been using that are just not effective at all. And so really reforming these kind of conversations. And also I know there's a Jewish student journal on campus by the Leviathan, that's what it's called. And so really having them kind of even kind of share perspectives of like Jewish issues as well, I think it would be good.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question for both candidates, and we're gonna start with Maria this time. So as the campus is planning into a hybrid model for the 2021-22 academic year, what outreach strategies do you plan on utilizing to reflect the hybrid model for students who will learn in person and or online to ensure they receive the same accessibility to information and resources?
Something that has really helped, that I've learned that has helped students, is recording the lectures and making them available to students. And even another thing is just bringing awareness to or welcoming feedback from students and making like Instagram lives where I can address these questions and concerns. Since we have been under the Office of the President, we've been working on the project crisis communication team, and that's kind of something that we would want to do, because you can't really define a certain crisis. Crises come in multiple different forms, and then ensuring that students are reflected in the same in-person and the hybrid, in the hybrid model. And Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I think okay. Oh, I was saying I would want students to ensure that that in a hybrid in a hybrid form that they would be allowed accessible resources for students, because I know oftentimes some have accessibility to record elections and others don't. And then I would want professors to really welcome students' feedback, and I would want to create a bond, like social distancing events where I can welcome all these feedbacks. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to make a note that this is an audience question. I forgot to mention that earlier, but this one is from the audience. Jose, you'll have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, I really love this question, so I thank the individual for posting it. Again, I think I really want to have that relationship with student media on campus, because I know there's students that, given past histories, they don't trust legislative bodies like the SUA, and I truly understand. And so I think if they feel more comfortable going into like individuals who work within like City of the Hill Press, or just like the KZSC student radio on campus, or even other kind of student media platforms, I think they can kind of have an easier access to the information about the issues at hand, about kind of what the SUA entails, and also what kind of resources that are available to them. And so kind of working alongside them, having more transparent communication. So maybe bi-weekly kind of report backs about my office, about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or just kind of making sure that we have that increased, again, transparency. But again, I think is really going within a hybrid model is still continuing online digital formats. And so really outreaching within social media. Even kind of, if I were to kind of get this position, I intend to kind of have a website of my office itself to really post information that students can kind of access about material information about where to kind of get PPE if we have PPE available, or kind of about how to go about textbooks if they are in need of textbooks, or just kind of any student materials on campus. And so I think I really want to ensure that we have that transparency. And so I think it's just really working alongside organizations, again, student media, and really making sure that we have as many platforms available and continuing outreaching on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Jose. Maria, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I do agree with making the resources accessible to all students. I know my first year in Oaks Senate, we started the Oaks Lending Library just because a lot of students didn't have access to the lending library and the EOP. So maybe bringing that idea to other student governments would really help in ensuring that students have these resources available in person. And then also maybe we did have a website for the lending library as well, where they can find like reports or just or get any books that students want to donate. Just like yeah, just donating resources to other students that we have.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Let's see. So moving on to another question. With some professors being unaware of their microaggressions toward marginalized students, if a student or group of students came to you with a complaint about a professor, what steps might you take to solve this conflict? And we can start off with Jose.
I think for this one is working really closely with the Academic Senate and even the Vice President of Academic Affairs, because I feel like that's most in their purview. And so kind of really understanding what steps students can take. I think we also had to make these grievances a lot easier. So having the process a lot easier, kind of breaking it down for students on how to address the issue. But I think is, again, making sure that the campus itself is also taking accountability for these actions. And so making sure that all administrators, such as the provost, even the deans of these specific schools on campus, or even kind of department chairs are aware of the issue, but making sure that even the student within these meetings, if they were to kind of file a grievance, they have some sort of representation alongside them. That way they feel comfortable kind of bringing it up and they're not alone in the process. And so I think, again, it would have to be really working alongside the Academic Affairs Office.
Thank you, Jose. Maria, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I agree that we would have to collab with the VP Academic Affairs and as well as the Academic Senate. And we would also have to listen to students, understand what they need. And then in terms of the professors, as I mentioned, I would want to collaborate with them. So I would also share with them resources in terms of educating them about what students are going through, and even keeping them accountable, because we are paying them to create a safe space for us and give us equal opportunities. So that's something that they should be doing all throughout our years at UC Santa Cruz. And then just even sharing this information through various professors. I know a lot of times it's usually between like the politics or legal studies professors, but it can also be to like chemistry professors or like biology professors, or any professor in any field on campus, because it's really important for students to feel included in any class setting, whether in person or online.
Thank you, Maria. Jose, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I also agree with the notion of kind of working with faculty on this issue. And so also possibly bringing kind of a collective of faculty who are in ethnic studies departments to kind of really understand the issue at hand, kind of give some advice to the student. But I think is also addressing if this is a reoccurring issue of the professor. And if so, I think we have to hold them accountable, and we shouldn't tolerate it just because they are not kind of understanding the concerns and hearing the concerns of students, and it's just going to be a repetitive cycle. And so I think we should have hold them accountable and possibly replacing them as well.
Great, thank you, Jose. And I'm going to move to my last question. So with new students from marginalized identities coming here in the fall, they may be unaware of campus resources and groups that they identify with. So how would you plan to ensure that these new students can develop community with these groups on campus? And we can start off with Maria.
So this goes back to an initiative that I had for my platform in figuring out a way to centralize this information. As I mentioned, I would want to collaborate with the director of digital communications, or even build an app as we've been doing in the Office of the President, because it'll be a way for students to see what resources are out there, what organizations are out there. I know I'm barely learning about organizations, and there's like hundreds of Instagrams, but it's difficult for us to like find them. So I want to link like their Instagram, their email, like even presidents or chairs from that organizations, and like resources that they provide for students. And this also correlates with working with student resource centers and what I mentioned in outreaching to students, especially the most vulnerable, about the resources that they have access to.
Thank you, Maria. Jose, you have 2 minutes to respond.
If you don't mind, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no worries. Give me 1 moment. With new students from marginalized communities coming here in fall, they may be unaware of campus resources and groups that they identify with. So how do you plan to ensure that these new students can develop community with these groups on campus?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question again. I would say that as students are coming in, we should also update our kind of like campus websites with the information. And so ensuring that they have a whole list, that it's updated with possible organizations that they can affiliate with, and kind of understanding in outreach. I know when I was trying to find information about student organizations, it's really hard. You had to really look in yourselves through social media, or kind of ask friends word by mouth about where to access the information. And so I think it's just having that more accessibility of like contact information from the organization, so that if students are interested in joining an organization, they can reach out to them if possible. But also kind of, we do have cornucopia. I know it's in a digital format this past year, but really making sure that we continue to have these kind of quarterly, I guess you want to say like Club Rush, or like organization kind of platforms to kind of share who they are, really kind of engage with students, and really making sure that students are able to kind of choose and pick who they wish. But if they ever have any struggles or want more information, I think that's where this office really comes into play, and making sure that we can kind of give them the best point of contact and information to address any questions they may have.
Thank you, Jose. And Maria, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I do like the idea that Jose brought up with the quarterly club rushes. And then something that I was thinking in terms of that aspect is connecting with student governments, and each college has a theme. So bringing organizations that correlate with that theme would really help bring more of like this culture into our colleges. and it'll also help with accessibility because cornucopia is usually on the east field, and like I always found it difficult to even go over there. So just even bringing organizations into a college, and then like in the next quarter they'll go to another college, just so each student in each college has accessibility to attend.
All right, time is up. Thank you. And we're now moving to the portion where you will have 30 seconds to ask each other a question, and then the other candidate will have 1:30 to respond. Jose, you may begin.
So based on your campaign's website, only 5 of your 8 platforms are listed with very vague information, in my opinion. So do you hold each goal and priority to equal value? And if you may, can you elaborate how you have ensured transparency with the student body?
So the reason that I don't have a lot of information is because I'm always willing to welcome student feedback, and as student provide me feedback, I would be able to formulate some solutions or plans for each of those platforms. And then in terms of transparency, I have worked on under the SUA Office of the President, I worked on this thing called the Change Tracker, which is the current Vice President's the platform. And then right there, I have listed every project that we worked on, who we've communicated with, what emails we've sent, what things we've posted on Instagram. And I've also done Instagram takeovers where I've listed each of our work and provided transparency and accountability purposes for our office.
All right, thank you. And now Maria, you may ask your question to Jose.
I also saw on your website that you have a plan towards campus safety, and the SUA Office of the President has worked on building this crisis communication team. And we did have some trouble in terms of liability. And I was wondering if you took that into consideration and which administration you would reach out to, because that's something that we've seen that we would have to work with admin.
No, thank you for this. I think for me, I do appreciate the platform. I think I was also questioning and having conversations with the current SUA president and alongside you too, in terms of what the platform really entailed. And so I think within the liability, that was the biggest issue that I brought up with you all. And so I think it's really kind of making sure that if we are going to be approaching with like possibly giving medical resources, that we are communicating with our health center on campus, that we're communicating with like local individuals that can kind of give this medical information, but ensuring that students who even possibly kind of share within their organizations, that they're not getting being liable for any instances, just because I really want to ensure that students have the freedom to share, but are not going to be impeded kind of like any legal action. And so I think, again, it would have to be working closely with our even campus legal liaison, with the health centers on campus, and just kind of other entities that may be aware of the issue.
Great, thank you very much to Maria and Jose. I'm now going to pass it on to Nick.
Hello there. So we have just finished our debate for VP of Diversity and Inclusion. I want to thank both candidates for coming to the stage and spending your time here. And as you can see, we have finished our first block here on the schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We're actually about 9 minutes ahead of schedule, which is surprising. So we'll take a 10-minute break, and we will end up back here at 8:11. And I hope to see you all very shortly. Thank you. Alrighty, folks. We've got about 10 seconds left in our break, and so we're going to go ahead and get started real quickly here. All right. So first, I would like to welcome everybody back to the space. Hello and welcome back. We're from our break and we're moving swiftly along, which is really nice. So after our break, our first thing on the schedule is going to be the debate of VP of Internal Affairs. I do want to take a quick moment here to remind the folks in our audience that if they use the Q&A function, the moderators are going to be vetting those questions and hopefully we'll be able to ask the candidates those questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A function in order to ask the candidates your question. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to our esteemed moderator, Owen. Owen, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you again, Nick. This will be another single person debate where I will be providing you with 2 minutes for an opening statement, and then I will follow it up with a series of cross-examination and prepared questions. I'd like to get right in, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Owen. Hi, everybody, and thank you for attending this debate and sticking through it, everyone who's still here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kayla Gomez. I go by she, her, ella, and I'm running for VP of Internal Affairs. I'm a third-year politics major studying human rights, communication, and leadership. And although I'm new to the SUA space, I do have leadership experience. Since starting at UCSC, I've been involved in taking on leadership roles within organizations such as the Everett program and the ASED program, just to name a couple. I've served as a fellows coordinator, often acting as a liaison between students, fellows, and staff. And I've gained facilitation skills, mentored students, and supported 2 cohorts of fellows within a program that has a lot of moving parts. In the ASED program, the Apprenticeship and Community Engaged Research Program, I worked as a co-lead for the C9, C10 Alternative Spring Break program in Watsonville, and now co-facilitate a 1-unit social justice colloquium class of 20 undergrads. My priorities for this next year are number 1, retention and graduation, and connecting with the various organizations across campus to support their efforts toward increasing the retention and the graduation rates of our campus. I'm not satisfied with what they are now. We could be doing a lot better. And this has to do a lot with the basic needs and equity on our campus. So specifically food and housing security and support, mental health services, community and sense of belonging. These are all basic needs. And student empowerment and advocacy is my third. So encouraging more students to apply for the SCOC, the Student Committee on Committees, and continue to support these students so that they can get the best out of their experience. We need all of these seats to be filled. And transparency and inclusivity. So working toward co-creating an SUA space that is more inclusive, transparent, and accessible by implementing feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I'd like to start off with the fact that you mentioned that you are majoring in communication, but you've also indicated that you're not quite satisfied with the retention and graduation standards at the school right now, and that you're expecting to work with organizations to improve those numbers. And how do you intend to communicate your goals to these organizations in order to achieve the maximum benefit?
So I'm not, just to clarify, I'm not majoring in communication. This is what I particularly, no, it's okay. What I particularly am studying, what I'm interested in. So these are really passions of mine that I pay attention to closely when I'm in my major of politics and everywhere I go. So in reaching out to these organizations to collaborate, first of all, I want to know what kinds of issues matter to them most. I want to know where they're at, get a sense of what they're working on at the moment, and what kind of relationship that they have with the SUA currently, so that we can focus on what that relationship might look like in the future, if they actually need our support, if they want to collaborate with us, and so forth.
And in relation to figuring out where these organizations are and what support they need, how would you work within the SUA to ensure that those organizations have the support that you think they need?
So this goes back to making sure that SUA is an inclusive and accessible space. I would say, if we want organizations and more students to engage with SUA, which has been brought up in the past as an issue, I think we need to be focusing on actually making it accessible, transparent, and making accountability a priority, and working with the vision committee to do this. So what does this look like? I think accessibility means creating a safe and inclusive environment where all can participate and have a sense of belonging, being approachable. And what I mean by that is by being honest, listening, and seeking to understand when we don't know something, and honoring the knowledge of other students who share their experiences and knowledges. And having an SUA that is culturally informed and relevant. And this is also why I think that the Big Five are essential to our mission and goal to serve students. So I think that their experience is very, and participation is very crucial in our space. And I think we should make it a space where they actually want to come in.
With regards to implementing feedback and making sure that these organizations, that the SUA is accessible to students, what systems do you see that are already in place or that you would like to see in place in order to ensure that feedback is brought to the SUA in a way that it's implemented effectively?
So I know that SUA officers try and keep monthly updates and reports on what they're doing published online, which is publicly available for all students. I've personally taken a look at some of those. And I think at the end, there's a section for critical feedback. I would really encourage everybody to participate and actually fill that part out, and maybe going through what does good feedback look like, and then actually addressing it afterward once it's implemented.
Thank you for those answers. A point that you brought up a number of times, and this is starting to move into the prepared questions, is making sure that these spaces feel inclusive, and you cited belonging, a sense of belonging as being a key part of that. And I'd like to get a sense of what you understand as ways to make this space both more inclusive and to ensure that students, what you would expect a student, what you would offer to a student in order to make them feel that this is a place in which they belong.
So one thing would be making sure that they, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yes, I'm sorry, I stumbled through it a couple of times, but you've mentioned making spaces inclusive, and that a key part of that is making them spaces with belonging. And what resources would you offer to ensure that students feel that this is a place of belonging?
I would say that students, well, first of all, working with the vision committee to make sure that we're to have those kinds of conversations about what's working, what's not working. And I would also try and kind of create, well, I think students care more when we are engaging in conversation or working toward issues that are actually relevant to them, and when they see that we're pursuing what we're intending to do and what we stated we were going to do. So I would say, I'm so sorry, I forgot the question like twice.
I think that you produced a good answer for ways in which you would make sure that the space is inclusive. But you also mentioned in that answer addressing relevant issues and demonstrating that the SUA is going to follow through. And I'm interested to know how you would ensure that the SUA is being held accountable to these promises that it makes and the expectations of the student body.
So I would say that has a lot to do with just the culture between or within the SUA body in general. I think that, I think we could definitely use like a workshop on effective communication. And I think that will also really help all of us to, understand one another a little bit better and collaborate better. I think we all know that we're coming in with good intentions and that we all want to do good work to serve our students, our student body. But I would also encourage, feedback, not as a way to attack one another or kind of catch each other off guard, but really encourage feedback as a way to encourage growth. And that's my answer.
Thank you. Let's see. This is a audience question that I think may be interesting to hear your address to. There are issues with public transportation to and from campus and in between with both the Loop and city buses. Sometimes the buses are very packed with students waiting at the bus stop, and many are left behind due to overcrowding. Do you have any plans to improve the public transportation on campus to deal with this overcrowding issue in particular? This is of a special concern in a year in which we've seen COVID-19 and a attempt to have social distancing.
So that's a great question. I definitely remember the times when, buses were packed to the maximum. I think that issue is something that would be a really good opportunity to engage students in the SUOC. There's a committee, I'm blanking on what committee exactly, but I know they work with transportation issues of that sort. So I would say, seeing as that's an issue of interest, actually making sure that we're supporting those students and engaging students to join these committees, and making sure that their voices are heard. Can you repeat the question? Actually, I don't know if I answered it fully.
Yes, I think you've answered much of it, but if you'd like to add, the question was to deal with if you have any plans to improve the public transportation on campus, in particular the overcrowding issue.
Okay, yeah, I would say is just supporting the students who are interested in those, in joining those committees, really supporting and making sure that they have the resources that they need to advocate.
Following on the theme of adjusting to COVID-19, you've mentioned the importance of reaching out to committees and making sure that there's a coordinated effort on campus to address student needs. And I'm interested to know your plans with regard to, as we move into kind of a hybrid of on-campus and online, if that changes your understanding of what engaging with these orgs looks like.
Currently right now, I think both in hybrid and in person, the first step usually is an email. So I think, I'll be able to reach folks across campus from different organizations first there, and we can kind of figure out together what would work best for them. And I would adjust to that. So just being flexible to whatever works with whatever organizations we're working with, being respectful and accommodating for them so that we make sure that we're able to collaborate in a way that is best for both.
You've also mentioned the importance of being approachable through honoring knowledge and being aware of when you don't have all the answers. What are some situations in which, well, how would you check your biases, and are you, how do you, would you be open to training seminars within the SUA in order to improve the character of the SUA and in particular address bias?
I would definitely, that's part of the plan. I think the more we know, if we're going into these kind of trainings together, first of all, it builds a team. We're all getting kind of the same information, so we're all on the same page. We're more informed, so we'll be more prepared. And I also think that, there's a lot of information that's going around, and a lot of information that we could benefit from to be able to better serve our student body.
One of your main jobs on the as the Vice President of Internal Affairs will be to act as the SUOC chair. And one of the duties of the SUOC is providing budgets to the college representatives in order to hold events on their colleges. In what ways would you support these elective representatives, both inside the SUOC space and planning on their college?
Well, I would definitely make sure to meet with them regularly. I heard mention of resource guides earlier. I was thinking about resource guides and kind of making sure that these students know what they're getting into, and also making sure that they're consistently kind of updating the office on what they're doing so that we know how we can support them.
Another position in which your communication would be important is serving as the taking the office of the president in a position where the president is not able to attend the meeting, and how you intend to work closely with the president in order to maintain communication and get a sense of what direction your elected year will want to move the SUA towards.
Well, I think, first of all, meeting with the president regularly, making sure that we're touching base on what's going on and communicating regularly. Yeah, I would say just like making sure to meet with them regularly. I don't know what else would kind of go into that. But I would need to check in with them first of all to see what would work best for them as well.
So then when you say meeting regularly, are you meaning meeting regularly outside of the meetings that are held by the SUA, engaging in a more personal meeting? Is that what you're talking about?
I would say meeting more regularly, like for just to check in on, just to gather feedback on what we're both working on.
All right, thank you. And I believe this will be our final question. How would you resolve a conflict between a person within the SUA and someone from outside of the space?
I would personally seek a mediator and reach out to the support that's offered to me. This is somewhere where I would need to do more research on what that might look like to be better prepared for a situation like that.
Well, I think that that raises something of an interesting question, which is, given that you've worked on quite a variety of different organizations, are there any particular conflict resolution experiences or practices that you would want to bring into the SUA?
Yes, I would think, first of all, if someone's coming to me for some kind of issue that they're having with somebody else, then I would say, like, first of all, listening to kind of what's going on, just making space for them to share what's going on, understanding the perspective, and then trying to make sure that they both like understand. Sorry, it would be like, I can't think of a particular situation right now.
Well, thank you for your answer. I believe that is all the time, and I will pass it back to Nick then. Thank you again for appearing.
Thank you.
All right, hello there and welcome back. So we're gonna go up here to our schedule. We just finished the VP of Internal Affairs. Again, thank you for coming, we really appreciate it. And we're gonna go ahead and move into our next debate, which is the VP of Student Life, and I will be moderating that. And so we'd like to invite the candidate to the stage. You have 2 minutes for your opener on your first word.
Hey y'all, my name is Jimmy Gomez and I'm running to be your Vice President of Student Life. Two interpersonal frameworks of leadership to me are public health equity and student programming. These core values have granted me the possibility to assist several campus partners such as EOP, Jack Baskin School Engineering, the Peer Review Conduct Board, and pre-health organizations in fulfilling their student-centered initiatives. I wish to have 3 platforms if elected. The first, the continuation of dismantling basic needs of security. Through the Student Advocates Office, welfare services such as CalFresh enrollment, the free grocery gift card program, emergency housing funding allocation, student conduct assistance, and the maintenance of pre-existing SUA food pantries will be pivotal for retention and health. Secondly, uplift student engagement. By advocating greater funding for campus organizations through SOFA, their main objective can be visible across campus. The plausible hybrid model for this upcoming year will have challenges, and informing students about funding possibilities to build more community and meet their student needs properly will be a priority. Lastly, elevate cultural programming events and promote campus events such as Relay for Life, Holly Festival, La Bienvenida, and much more. My final platform is mental health advocacy and academics, collaborating with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, to host comprehensive workshops pertaining to mental wellness and self-development can sustain more student representation and reflect their interests. Additionally, guide students with any academic grievances, appeals, and interpreting housing and financial documentation in the Student Advocates Office. These platforms are some of my ideas, and with your suggestions as well, I'm optimistic we can combat the disparities at UC Santa Cruz. Thank you for your time, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. We will now go ahead and begin 2 minutes of cross-examination. So on your last point, you talk about increasing mental health on campus, and you talk about partnering with the group NAMI. Name 2 ways that NAMI improves our campus that things like CAPS and the DRC do not already exist on campus.
Yeah, so I mentioned NAMI because I'm close with the program coordinator in the Santa Cruz chapter county. And so in doing so, the 2 reasons as to why I would partner with them is first, representation. Often CAPS has been subjected to student insight of not having appropriate representation when it comes to really understanding the needs of students or having really similar interaction with when it comes to identity. And lastly, it would also become to the numbers. Working as a peer review conduct officer this year, I was always hearing cases of students where they were saying that CAPS, it was completely unavailable to meet with them on such a short notice. So if it's necessary to have a third-party affiliate such as NAMI to really bring in professionals as well who are experts in what they do, that'd be very crucial to make sure that student needs are met. All
right, let me go ahead and pause you there. So you talk about how bringing the third party in NAMI might help alleviate the problems that many students have noticed at CAPS. Is there any way that your office directly impacts CAPS and tries to increase the diversity in CAPS or increase the ability that students have access to it? Or is it strictly just a third party?
So something that I would always be very clear with this office is that it's important to collaborate and distribute the existing resources on campus. However, I would always do these workshops because if we can really get students to just know about other off-campus resources that are available to them, that'd be really amazing. Often with the referrals with the health centers, it also takes some time for them. So if we can start building even a partnership, it would just be more effective for students to know directly who to go to if they're ever facing a particular crisis.
All right. Let me ask you at least one more question here. So in your second point, you talk about SOFA and wanting to create more events for students. What unique way will you have to outreach to students that is not already in implementation in order to gauge their community support for whatever events that they want?
So outreaching for SOFA primarily consists of one representative at the moment from 1 to 3 if your colleges has more who's an SUA representative. And so often, sometimes it's really difficult to make sure that students, especially right now during remote, are being able to know that funding possibilities are available for them. So in doing so, I would always make sure that with the organization that I'm a part of currently, that amounts to approximately 15, making sure that I can also bring in their insight and also even sending a new campus newsletter just dedicated for SOFA, because if we can really start incorporating a lot of students and knowing about where to reach out for money, then that'd be amazing.
All right, thank you very much. We will now go ahead and move into our prepared questions. So the first question I have to ask you that is prepared is actually very similar to your first point where you talk about the SUA food pantries. My question is, since you mentioned trying to bring off-campus students or trying to bring resources to off-campus students, do you have any plans to bring the food pantry off-campus to those students, and how would you accomplish that?
When it comes to making the food pantries accessible, that would be something that I, even as a candidate, will try to see where I can really incorporate transportation into it. Something that I will always advocate for and say in the office, in this office, if I am elected, is making sure that the hours are extended. So making sure that drop-in appointments right now with the new hybrid model that is being proposed is effective. And if that also means making sure even right now with virtual, giving those free grocery gift card programs to students without having to worry about the shipping and handling price associated with it, that'd just be amazing, because a lot of students really don't know the resources that are out there for them. And this office main issue from what I've heard has always been not being outreached enough. People don't know about the existence. And if we can really start putting it on the map and just talking about all the incredible advocacy that is associated with it and it can really do and implement, then we're talking about students really even knowing where to fully know their rights and what they can do throughout their undergraduate trajectory.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause you there. Just a follow-up question. So you mentioned extending the hours to the food pantry, and that is certainly one way to make it more accessible. But for students that have dietary restrictions, such as kosher, such as they're vegan or vegetarian, or they have an allergy to gluten, how exactly will you make the food pantry more accessible to students with dietary restrictions?
Something that I always make sure as a student leader is incorporating student insights. So that would either be through surveys, making sure that I have a documented record of it, because I really do believe that transparency and accountability make for two obligations that any leader on campus really should hold dear in their heart. So in making sure that food options are accessible, also continuing, right now there's been a huge vast of cultural dishes that are being done with the Cow Coffee Shop. So even with that, and in the summer, because I am planning to go there in the summer, just starting to even work on a dish or just making sure that it's also incorporated into the dining halls, because if we can really reflect the diverse representation on our campus, then we're asking, or we're not asking, we're better suggesting that there really is an overall supportive group that will always be there for you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to another prepared question here. And again, it has to refer directly to your platform. So in your platform, you mentioned that you want to build community, and that is certainly under the purview of student life. However, due to the pandemic, many new students have struggled significantly to gain a sense of school community and a sense of school spirit. What might you work on to expand and improve new students' experiences in this upcoming school year?
Thank you for that question, and I'm really happy to elaborate on some of even the efforts that I'm currently doing right now. So with the incoming, with this current class of 2024, with the freshmen and transfers, one of their biggest concerns was not knowing about the resources that were available to them. And so being a student leader in all of these organizations, that's what kept coming up. And so I've been able to already meet with the class of 2025, which are current high schoolers, through social media platforms, and really making sure that they know that, and I would also be very advocating for making sure that we partner with the UCC orientation office, because if they really know what's out there and just how to go towards appropriate representation, then students will just really feel more at comfort, and just easing that form of belonging on campus is something that I've always incorporated into my student leadership, because inclusivity is what promotes equity.
So you mentioned reaching out to the student orientation office. In recent years, they've started to move the vast majority of orientation online as opposed to in person. The orientation office actually made this move prior to the pandemic, and many students who come to the campus for the first time are surprised because they've never actually visited the campus because they haven't been mandated to do that through orientation. How do you try to solve for that for students that are coming to the campus for the first time and aren't sure about how to get around, for instance?
Something that what I would really love to do if I am elected would be making sure that we start taking advantage of the media resources on campus. So if that includes hosting like webinars for students during the summer, whether that includes also going to presentations when designed and allowed and given permission by the UCSC orientation office, that would be just a great starting point, because once we start meeting with these students and just telling them about what's on campus and the resources, I'm optimistic that often they'll be reaching out, but then even I as a student leader will always be reaching out to them. I'd make sure that my contact information is available and that they know that the office is meant to be somewhat of a 24/7 service.
So that directly kind of leads into our next question. So we've talked a lot about building community on campus, and because the university at least looks like it's trying to come back in fall, or at least at the very least winter, many students are going to be transitioning for the first time from an online school into an actual school in person. And you'd also mentioned about working with other resources on campus. I want to know how you're going to work with the RAs and the college student senates in order to make that transition easier for students that are coming back for the first time.
So communication will be key. When doing so, making sure that event programming is something that I really would want to still do. I've had enormous success this past year, this current year as well, having events that expand over 300 students attending. And I really pride myself in making sure that students from all grade levels and all demographics can attend those. And when doing so, is also will be pivotal to address the concern of just where they can really build community. So with the outreaching, that's where the campus newsletter will play a very detrimental role in assuming how we're supposed to be talking about the different programs that are registered this year and for the upcoming.
So about the campus newsletter, I assume you're referring to the Tuesday Newsday newsletter that goes out?
I am not.
Oh, what are you referring to then?
So I'm referring to just an overall campus newsletter, different to the slug scope, which the current running officer, president officer has spoken about today and has published on social media. I would really want it to be geared towards more on the undocumented population. Often they are the ones that are affected the most when it comes to services on campus. They're restricted, their limitations, they don't understand the appeals, the grievances, and the documentation, as I mentioned before.
So let me pause you there very briefly. And so I'm trying to decipher this. Is this different from Slug Scoop, or is it its own separate newsletter? And how does your office plan to accomplish that?
Yeah, so this is separate, and I would really love for digital media students to even apply to be caseworkers, because in being the vice president of student life and the overall somewhat you can call chair of the student advocates office, it'd be overseeing a number of caseworkers and directors. So making sure that they have a lot of immense media skills, so then we can start putting that out there. And so with the newsletter, it'll come down to just how we are envisioning students and what they want. And so even informing students about what my office is doing, because transparency has been an issue previously in SUA, and I wish to address it fully, and making sure that any student who reaches out to me or any officer, if we ever work collectively, can give the proper information about what's happening.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask just a very quick follow-up to that. And so Slug Scoop has gone out, or is supposed to be going out through the office of the president, and then your office will have its own newsletter. Is there too much redundancy in the amount of newsletters that SUA is planning to send out, or how do you plan to make sure that students see those two different newsletters and they know how it's different? How do you uniquely solve for that?
So I want to point out the distinction. Slug scope would be, according to what the president of SUA currently has said, it's more about just like events and some resources. I would really, and as I said before, making sure that students are aware of what the student advocate office is doing, because that's one of the reasons why I felt very invigorated to run. It's just that I didn't even know that this office existed when I ran, and I really would have wanted students to know of its existence and see how much support they can be receiving, because once you have that peer-to-peer interaction, and I would always mention that in the newsletter, is that this isn't a space, or this isn't a service. The service that you will be provided will be coming from admin. It will be coming from a student who will then help you with any so-called representation and guide you throughout any comprehensive or stressful crisis that you're experiencing while you're at UC Santa Cruz.
All right. So I'll get to the Student Advocates Office in a little bit, but I did want to touch on this. So you had mentioned where the newsletter that goes out through the President's Office is primarily for events and things of that variety. Under the under the Office of Student Life, that is certainly part of your purview as well, to have those events. And many students, many new students in particular, have felt very unmotivated to participate in those campus activities. How will you make sure to keep students interested and motivated to come to events, and how will you make sure that those are COVID safe once we go back in person? You have about a minute left to respond to that.
Yeah, sorry. So definitely what first I would really love is having like spaces or circles of hearing overall discussion. I think if I really put myself out there, and I think that should be my responsibility, and it is, if I am elected, it's basically making sure that I receive the student insight. And so with low retention and participation, when it comes to virtual programming, that would include working with the College Senate specifically, and then even working with organizations that I'm a part of, or they really just have been able to get a lot of people, specifically the cultural orgs. Often students want a place far away from home, so they're very drawn to identity orgs that provide a similar sense of comfort. And that would also even be an amazing opportunity to collaborate with the elected Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion if given the opportunity.
Right, thank you. So let's move on to the Student Advocates Office. And you mentioned this a couple of times during your platform and throughout remaining speeches as well. So as I understand it, the Student Advocates Office is an office on campus that primarily sees cases and then dispenses funds that is mostly for students without housing. Is that correct?
At the moment, the Student Advocates Office also manages academic conduct. Often students, whenever they face like a particular incident with ProctorU, for example, they can go to them, they can really know how to file an appeal with whether they have any comfort, or whether they're having difficulties with withdrawing, really knowing how to address those issues with a professor. Now that we're in an ongoing pandemic, and we still will for a while, students really just don't know who to go to. And so with that resource being distributed and being known of, and students taking advantage of it, I see a higher amount of students just also performing well academically as students, and really feeling drawn to be part of the UC Santa Cruz community with the hybrid model that will potentially be proposed this upcoming fall quarter.
I just want to ask a quick follow-up on that. So the Student Advocates Office, do they dispense an amount of funds? Is that under their purview?
Yeah, sorry, please forgive me for interrupting you.
No, that's fine. So they do dispense funds, and if I remember correctly, that is on a grant-based system that I believe is renewed every 2 years. How will your office make sure that that grant is renewed when it's upcoming either this year or next year?
Yeah, so you mentioned grant. The current money that was obtained these past 2 years came from UCOP. And so making sure that I also meet with SHASH, which is known to be the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems on campus, and talking to their liaison, and making sure that I also even work with EVP. The current officer who spoke today was talking about how advocating for basic needs requires a lot of state funding and also state support, and meeting with UC admin. And so when it comes to basic needs, I will always be very professional in making sure that I try to do my best to get those wellness grants, and then incorporating and distributing it, and just creating new programs even that students can get those resources to in a virtual or remote instruction learning environment.
Right. Just one last question on the Student Advocate's Office here. So as I understand it, there's a significant amount of caseworkers that are also students. Do you have any plans to increase the number of students that are serving under the Student Advocate's Office? And do you have any plans to try to pay them for their services, or are they already being paid?
You mentioned that there's a significant amount of students currently under the SAO office.
Yes, as I understand it. I'm not sure if that's 100% correct.
Currently, there are 7. That would include 2 directors that currently overwatch conduct, basic needs, financial, housing, etc. And then there's a chief of staff. And then there's 2 specialized caseworkers for each of those 2 branches in making sure that the interaction and the overall communication is more coherent. And so I have heard that it's definitely been very difficult for a lot of caseworkers. It's an immense it's a great opportunity, but it requires immense training. And often you have to go through that training to then feel like you're able to really put yourself in a mindset and advocate for students when they're facing any form of crisis. And you touched upon increasing the number of interns. I'd be all for it. I think that if I can get funding from the Division of Student Success, where they allow you to really get a lot of support in less than a 2-week period, that'd be a great stepping stone in making sure that student engagement in that office is more accessible, and even bringing students. Well, the current office is bringing students from all different parts of campus. So maintaining that level and philosophy of inclusivity, because once you start getting that diverse and rich student insight, you're making sure that students are then being advocated properly.
Thank you for that. 7 caseworkers sounds like a lot of work for not a whole lot of people. And I know that your office, touching back on the food pantry as well, your office has interns that are working for this food pantry and all that stuff. How do you balance both of those as the Student Life office, or both the food pantry and the Student Advocate's office? And how do you try to get more people working for both as opposed to just one or the other?
So I would really love, and based on my previous experience as an EOP peer advisor, where I managed around like 3,000 students and was in charge of their CalFresh enrollment program, also as a CalFresh ambassador with basic needs, I really make sure that at least students who were facing some form of unexpected circumstances knew about the existence of food pantries, because often the deadline for CalFresh, if you are even available or applicable to obtain, takes roughly around a month, because you have to turn in a documentation, you have to meet with a supervisor, you have to meet with someone who will also then approve it and have an interview. So then when it comes to the engagement of increasing the amount of student in the pantry office, I think that's great. If we can start getting more students who are willing to volunteer, that's perfect. And I would be great to manage all.
All right, thank you very much. I believe that's all we have time for questions. So I wanted to thank you for coming down to the debate and being able to spend time with us and talk about your platform and your positions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the consideration.
All right. So one last thing that we have here, if you take a look at the schedule, we are at 8:54 and our break is supposed to be 8:50 to 8:55. So I apologize for that, running a touch behind. But we're going to go ahead and skip the break because our candidate for the Stevenson elected rep is actually here. And I am going to be the moderator for this debate as well. So I wanted to just go ahead and get right into it. All right, so you have 2 minutes to go ahead and present your platform, and your time starts on your first word.
Hi everyone, my name is Ciara Mcdavis, and I'm currently a freshman for class of 2024. This year with the pandemic has been very tough for everyone, and it was a tough transition for me personally. As someone who was new to college and Zoom, I found it difficult to try to get involved, and it was a little discouraging. But once I found out that there was a Stevenson Student Council, I knew that I wanted to join. So once I got involved, I realized that this was not just a community or not just a committee, it was actually a family. They welcomed me with open arms. And so from there, I was able to become one of the elected Stevenson representatives for SUA. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I learned that SUA has kept me on my toes and has made me someone who definitely wants to get more interested and take on a bigger role. That is why I am running for college elected Stevenson rep today. I am here today because I want to be a voice for the community. I learned that a lot of people aren't as adamant as showing their voice. And I feel like I am someone who would want to be that advocate for people who necessarily can't. As a Stevenson representative, I'm going to listen and reflect on the information I receive from the community or the family and from the SUA space. For me, it's all about communication and collaboration, listening to people and trying to get as much information and trying to give as much information so people aren't shut out of the dark or whatever is happening. In all, with all the stress that we have been through this year, I want this year to be positive and uplifting and to be as a family once again. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and go into 2 minutes of cross-examination. So my first question is, you talked about how Stevenson Student Council has really been a family for you. How do you feel that you can uniquely give back to the Stevenson community?
I uniquely can give back to the Stevenson community I think just by being myself, by being who I truly am, by being someone who is willing to listen to others, by being someone who's willing to dish out ideas, by being someone who is willing to go above and beyond the standard. I feel like I could also be a friend to the people in the space. I feel like over Zoom, it's hard to connect with people and it's hard to form a genuine connection. So I feel like once I get back on campus or even on Zoom, try my best just to connect with people individually.
Let me go ahead and pause you there because as part of the elected rep for Stevenson, one of the requirements is that you have to have office hours so that way people can come in. And you mentioned a lot about being a friend and being a resource for Stevenson Student Council and the Stevenson College as well. Through those office hours, how will you market yourself to make yourself more available to the general body of Stevenson or the general population of students at Stevenson outside of just beyond the Student Council?
So like you said, I would be offering out office hours, and I do have office hours right now as a Stevenson representative. I do tend to use social media a lot, and my Zoom link, it is on the Stevenson website and the SUA website as well. So I would what's that word? I would post a lot about like me being there for people and being someone that someone can talk to. So I would post on like my Instagram, my Facebook, and things like that, saying like if you ever needed to talk or if you had any concerns for Stevenson College, or oh well, someone so and so is not listening to me in Stevenson College, can you be that mediator? Can you be that advocate for me? And
all right, I'm going to go ahead and pause you there. I have time for just one last question on this cross-examination period. So you mentioned that you are a freshman coming in this year, and presumably that means that you have an incredibly unique experience with just being on Zoom. And so I was wondering, what have you learned from simply being on Zoom that will allow you to help new students that are coming in next fall?
From being on Zoom, I feel like you can get lost as a student in the classroom. Like in the Zoom setting, it's easy just for a professor to not see you or for a person not to see you. And I felt like trying your best to try to reach out to people really helped me personally, reaching out to people and just trying to find that buddy that will help you along through your process.
All right, thank you. So we have time for, I believe, one, maybe two prepared questions. So I'll go ahead and go into those. Our first prepared question is last year, and this may be difficult because you were not here, or the year prior to the end of the world and the pandemic. Last year, the dining hall in Cal Stevenson had actually shut down due to asbestos concerns, and many students that were on campus at the time had to go to other dining halls. How would you advocate for your college in the SUA space if a similar event were to happen again?
I would advocate for, well, first, of course, we would have to use somebody else's dining hall, and obviously that is not ideal. But if that is the situation, we will all have to adapt to that situation. But we can't just push the situation aside. Someone has to step up, and of course, I would take that position of stepping up. And I would come up with fundraisers, fundraisers, donating, trying to get. Sorry, can you repeat like the question, what you're exactly asking me? I think I missed.
Of course. So last year, or it might have been the year before, the Stevenson Dining Hall had to shut down because they had asbestos concerns. Asbestos is some type of cancerous substance that should not be in the walls. And so if an event were to happen on this scale that significantly impacted and harmed Stevenson students, how would you advocate for your college in the SUA space?
Well, I would first bring it to the Stevenson's council. I would bring it to their attention on how this is affecting people and how this is a potential harm to people, and how we can't continue to let this open, and it has to get fixed. Well, I would first also reach out to the Stevenson's to the Stevenson director who is in charge of the whole Stevenson council. And I feel like I would go with him, set up meetings to seek solutions of how we could fix this, and how we could spread awareness of this, and how we won't stop until it does get fixed, because people do need a dining hall. They can't be expected to walk different places just to get food, if that makes sense. So this is a tough question because I haven't had the experience of being on campus, but I feel like this is a serious, it would be a serious situation. So it would take a lot of communication between me and the director, and trying to figure out solutions to how this can get all fixed.
Yeah. All right, thank you. And I just have one last question here. So you had mentioned that you would reach out and start doing fundraisers and things of that variety. I was wondering, how exactly does fundraising work on Zoom, or would that take place more when we're back in person in winter quarter? Could you just explain that process to me a little bit?
Fundraising on Zoom. So actually I am a part of Operation Smile, and we just did a fundraiser of bingo Venmo, and where we advertised like a bingo board, and we did like a bingo game. So like for every, I believe so, it was like for every slot that pertained to you, you could donate $1 or donate $2, or how much you would want to donate, and that would go directly into the basically into the fund that would be geared towards, if it was for like the Stevenson Dining Hall, or for any of the expenses that we need. So I know that's an example of how we could do fundraising. There's also been, we have also done, what else have we done?
I'll go ahead and just pause you here because the bingo event sounds really unique and really interesting. I was just wondering, like, how successful was that event? And if it was successful, how can you make it more successful? How can you market it to like the whole of the Stevenson Student College next time?
It was actually pretty successful for how it was online. So we actually got to see who ended up Venmoing, and who how much money we actually came in, how much money actually came in. And it was mainly from close friends, people who are on your like Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but it is still people donating, and this can widespread if we get this sent out to the whole Stevenson group. If we have like, I know there's like an emailing list that we could send this to Stevenson, and maybe even other college affiliates can help out, knowing if the situation is dire, not dire, but like it is very important. So yeah, I feel like it was very successful for being on Zoom, and it was the first time we did it. And I would just want to expand it by trying to get other orgs or other college affiliates involved.
All right, well, thank you very much. That's all the questions that we have for you, and you are our last candidate and last debate, so I believe that wraps up the end of our debate. I wanted to say thank you very much to all of the candidates that came out. I wanted to appreciate all of the moderators who have been here for the last couple of hours and really working through. We've had a Slack going and making sure that we get audience questions in and all that fun stuff. So again, thank you all for turning out. It's really nice to have an event go off successfully. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw closing statements back to Brent.
Hi, everyone. I hope you had as much fun as I did listening to the responses to these questions from the candidates. And thank you to the moderators for coming up with a good portion of these questions. It's nice to see candidates really draw out their platform and civilly discuss their ideas to each other. So it was really good. I'd like to thank the attendees for also coming in and being part of this, being engaged in any like civic and local sort of local election. I know it looks different this year, but this is what you're doing. So I'd like to thank you for all coming in. And over here it's 9 p.m. So I'd like to wish everyone a good night. And we hope to see you at the polls, figuratively speaking.
All right, thank you all so much for coming. You are more than welcome to leave if you so desire. You don't have to sit here and spend the next couple of hours with us if you don't want to.